The haunting lens. All right, gather round, because what I'm about to tell you is one hell of a yarn. It all started with this old camera I inherited from my eccentric Aunt Millie. May she rest in peace. It wasn't one of those fancy digital contraptions. This thing was a bona fide relic from the 1950s. Heavy as a brick, it was. But here's the kicker. Every photo it snapped had a peculiar little quirk. The first time I took a picture with it, I was just testing it out, pointing it at a rather unremarkable vase on my windowsill. When I developed the photo, there it was, plain as day, the vase sure, but standing right beside it was my late grandfather, grinning like a Cheshire cat. Naturally, I thought it was some kind of prank. I checked the room, convinced I was losing it, but it was empty. It was just me and that photograph. That night, I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. I swear I heard whispers in the shadows, but when I flicked on the lights, there was nothing, just an empty room taunting me with its silence. I spent the next few days snapping pictures of everything, people, places, random objects, and every single time, there they were, long-lost relatives, all grinning, standing like sentinels in their sepia-toned world. At first, I was fascinated. I mean, who wouldn't be? I was holding pieces of my family history, captured in a moment of time that shouldn't exist, but it didn't take long for the novelty to wear off. The constant presence of my ancestors, always lurking in the background of my life, became unsettling, to say the least. The breaking point came when I took a picture of my bedroom mirror. Staring back at me in the photograph was a whole crowd of faces, grandparents, great-grandparents, aunts, uncles, all of them, just hovering there in the glass. I slammed the camera down, my heart racing. This was too much. I couldn't take it anymore. It felt like my family was closing in on me from all sides, suffocating me. I decided then and there that I needed to get rid of that cursed camera. So I did what any sane person would do. I drove out to the old abandoned mill on the outskirts of town. It was the kind of place where urban legends were born. Legend had it that it was haunted by the souls of workers who met untimely ends in its cocks and gears. Perfect place for a supernatural camera, right? I tossed that old relic into the mill's gaping maw, and I swear, for a moment, I felt a sense of relief wash over me. Maybe I was finally free from the watchful eyes of my ancestors. Days turned into weeks, and life started to regain some semblance of normalcy. I began to believe I was in the clear, that the camera was nothing more than a bizarre one-time fluke. Then came the day I received an unexpected package in the mail. It was the camera. No return address, no note, just that cursed dice, staring back at me from inside the box. My hands shook as I pulled it out. It was like some malevolent force was mocking me, taunting me with its reappearance. I knew then that there was no escaping it. I resigned myself to my fate and decided to confront the camera head-on. I sat in the dimly lit room, surrounded by the haunting photographs, and raised it to my eye. As the shutter clicked, I felt a cold chill run down my spine. I could sense something different about this photo, something I hadn't experienced before. When I developed it, my heart stopped. There in the picture was a room, my room, but not as I knew it. It was barren, with cracked walls and shattered windows, and in the center, surrounded by darkness, stood a figure, a twisted, shadowy spectre. I knew then that I had unleashed something far more sinister than my family's watchful eyes. This was a malevolence that had been lurking in the depths of that camera, waiting for its moment. I tried to destroy the camera, but it was no use. It had become a conduit for something beyond my comprehension. It was as if my ancestors had been the guardians, protecting me from this malevolent force. In a desperate bid, I turned the camera on itself and snapped a photo. The flash illuminated the room, and for a brief moment, I thought I saw a flicker of fear in the spectre's eyes. The photo, when developed, revealed a shattered, broken camera. The room grew silent, and I felt a weight lift from my chest. It was over. The camera was gone, along with the darkness it had brought into my life. So here I am, telling you this tale, not as a cautionary one, but as a plea. If you ever come across an old camera with a strange quirk, do yourself a favor, turn and run. Some things are better left undisturbed, and some photographs are better left unprinted. The vanishing image. All right, settle in, because this is one wild ride you won't believe. It all began innocently enough with an old, dusty photograph album I found in the attic. The cover creaked as I opened it, revealing sepia-tinted memories of a time long gone. But there was one photo that caught my eye, a group shot of my family at an ancient mansion. Now, I've been to our family estate plenty of times, but I'd never seen this particular room. Intrigued, I asked my parents about it, but they had no recollection of such a place. Something about that room seemed off. Determined to unravel the mystery, I decided to visit the mansion and recreate the photograph. As I set up my camera, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. I adjusted the focus, hit the shutter, and waited for the whir of film. But when I developed the photo, I froze. There they were, my parents, my siblings, everyone, standing in front of the mansion. Yet, in the exact spot where I stood, there was nothing but an empty space. I blinked, thinking it was a trick of the light, but the truth was undeniable. I had vanished from my own photograph. I must have taken a dozen more pictures, each time hoping for a different outcome, but the result was always the same. My presence was conspicuously absent from the images, replaced by a void. It wasn't long before I started feeling it. A strange sensation, like pins and needles creeping over my skin. At first, I brushed it off as nerves, but it persisted. It was as if my very existence was unraveling, pixel by pixel. I sought answers, diving into dusty tomes and consulting experts, but nothing could explain the inexplicable. That room, that photograph, they held secrets beyond my grasp. I couldn't shake the feeling that they were connected to my fading existence. Sleepless nights turned into blurry days. I was obsessed, determined to reclaim my place in the world of photographs. But as the days went by, my physical form began to mirror the emptiness in those images. My reflection in the mirror grew fainter, like a ghostly spectre barely holding on. Panic set in. I was running out of time, and there was no one to turn to. I was trapped in a nightmare of my own making. In a last-ditch effort, I returned to the mansion, hoping to find answers in that accursed room. The air grew heavy as I stepped inside, the walls whispering secrets long buried. I could feel a presence, something ancient and malevolent, lurking in the shadows. As I entered the room, a shiver ran down my spine. There, on the faded wallpaper, I saw it, a faint outline of a figure, barely visible, but undeniably present. It was me, but not quite. Suddenly, a voice echoed through the room, chilling me to the bone. "You should not have come here," it hissed, a chorus of whispers that seemed to come from all directions. I turned, heart pounding, but there was no one there. The room seemed to close in around me, the walls pulsating with a malevolent energy. I was trapped, a pawn in a game I didn't understand. And then it hit me, the plot twist I never saw coming. The photograph wasn't capturing reality, it was stealing it. With each snap of the camera, a piece of me was being siphoned away, trapped within that cursed image. I stumbled back, desperate to escape, but the room seemed to resist, its walls closing in on me. The sensation of fading grew stronger, my body becoming insubstantial. I was losing myself, inch by agonizing inch. With one last burst of energy, I sprinted for the door, praying it would lead me back to the world I knew. As I crossed the threshold, I felt a surge of power, a rush of life flooding back into me. I stumbled out into the daylight, gasping for air. I was whole again, my existence no longer hanging by a thread. The room, the photograph, they were behind me, but the horror of that experience would forever be etched in my memory. So here I am, telling you this tale, a cautionary one if ever there was. Beware the power of the photograph, for it may capture more than just an image. It may steal your very essence, leaving you a hollow shell, a fading memory of who you once were. The shifting portrait. Let me take you on a journey into the chilling unknown, a tale that begins with an ordinary photograph, but plunges you into the depths of your darkest secrets. It all started on a gloomy evening in my grandparents' old creaky house. I was sifting through their antique collection when I stumbled upon an ornate golden-framed photograph. The image depicted a seemingly abandoned mansion, overgrown with ivy, bathed in an eerie twilight. Its appearance gave me an inexplicable sense of unease, yet I couldn't look away. As I held the photograph in my hands, I realized something peculiar. The figures in the picture, a family standing at the entrance of the mansion, seemed to shift and change depending on how I looked at it. When I focused on the father, he became an older version of me, wearing a haunted expression that sent shivers down my spine. The mother transformed into a younger version of my own mother, tears in her eyes, as if she held a tragic secret. The child appeared as a younger me, wide-eyed and filled with dread. I was entranced by this supernatural metamorphosis, my curiosity getting the better of me. The photograph held an inexplicable power, and I knew I had to delve deeper. Placing it back in its frame, I positioned it on the mantel, as if it were a family portrait of my own. As I watched, my reflection began to blur within the glass, the room around me fading into a hazy void. Panic gripped me, but I couldn't tear my eyes away. It felt as if I was being drawn into the photograph, becoming a part of the eerie tattling. Suddenly, I found myself standing in front of that dilapidated mansion, the same one I had seen in the photograph. The feeling of déjà vu was overwhelming, but I was determined to explore this twisted reality. I ventured deeper into the house, my footsteps echoing through the empty hallways. Each room I entered revealed a piece of my life I had tried to forget. The first held the memory of a long-lost love, her image flickering in and out of focus. The next unveiled a dark secret I had buried deep within myself, as if the house was peeling away layers of my soul. The further I explored, the darker and more disturbing the revelations became. In one room, I witnessed a moment of my childhood when I had committed an act of cruelty that still haunted me. In another, I confronted the choices I had made that had led to pain and disappointment. The mansion had become a hall of mirrors, reflecting my most intimate regrets and fears. It was then that I realized the true nature of this sinister place. The shifting figures in the photograph were a mirror of my own inner demons. This house was an embodiment of my guilt and regret, and it was slowly breaking me down. Desperation set in as I realized that I had to find a way out of this nightmarish labyrinth. I retraced my steps, but the mansion seemed to stretch on endlessly, twisting and warping like a grotesque funhouse. My reflection in the windows showed a man on the brink of madness, his eyes hollow and tormented. As I entered the room where I had first arrived, the figures in the photograph began to merge into one, my own distorted visage. The mansion crumbled around me, and the photograph frame shattered, sending shards of glass flying. I found myself back in my grandparents' house, the photograph now empty, void of its supernatural power. My heart was still pounding, and the memories of the horrors I had faced within that twisted mansion were etched in my mind. The experience left me changed, haunted by the revelations it had forced me to confront. I understood that the photograph had not only revealed my inner secrets, but had also allowed me to face them head-on. It was as if it had been a mirror to my darkest fears and regrets, a reflection of the demons I had tried to hide. I knew I could never forget what I had seen, and I had to carry the weight of those revelations with me for the rest of my life. The supernatural photograph had shown me the depths of my own soul, and I had come face to face with the parts of myself I had long denied. So here I am, sharing this howling tale with you, a word of caution to anyone who stumbles upon an enigmatic photograph. Be prepared to face the truths you've hidden away, for they may not be as dormant as you think. The past has a way of catching up with us, and sometimes it takes a supernatural photograph to reveal the shadows we've tried to escape. The creeping shadows. All right, sit tight, because I've got a tale that'll send shivers down your spine. It all started on a sweltering summer day, the kind where even the air seemed to buzz with heat. Now, I've never been one to shy away from a good scare, but there's one thing that gets my heart racing faster than a roller coaster ride. Bugs. Yep, you heard me right. Insects, critters, creepy crawlies. They're the stuff of my nightmares. So there I was, stuck in my family's old cabin in the woods. You know the type, rustic, creaky, and practically inviting every bug within a mile radius to join the party. My family thought it would be hilarious to confront my fear head-on, as if my aversion to insects was just some silly quirk. My younger brother Mike was the ringleader of this little escapade. He had this mischievous glint in his eye as he handed me a jar, practically bursting with buzzing winged monstrosities. "Face your fear, bro," he taunted, grinning like a maniac. I could feel sweat trickling down my spine as I stared at those fluttering wings, my stomach doing somersaults. But I couldn't let them see me sweat. No sir. With a forced chuckle, I mustered up every ounce of courage I had and slowly lifted the lid. As soon as the lid came off, the insects took flight, swirling around me in a chaotic frenzy. Panic surged through my veins, but I held my ground, determined not to give them the satisfaction. It was a standoff between me and the bugs, and I was determined to come out on top. Just when I thought I had it under control, Mike dropped the bombshell. "Look behind you," he whispered, a wicked glint in his eye. I turned slowly, dreading what I might find. There, on the cabin wall, was a massive, furry, eight-legged nightmare. It seemed to leer at me, its eyes glinting malevolently in the dim light. I froze, my breath caught in my throat. Spiders were my ultimate nightmare, and this one was straight out of a horror movie. My mind raced, searching for an escape route, but my body refused to budge. Mike and the others burst into laughter, reveling in my terror. They had orchestrated this whole nightmare, knowing full well the phobia I harbored. It was a cruel prank, and I was the unwitting victim. After what felt like an eternity, Mike finally put an end to the charade. He gently ushered the spider out of the cabin, its many legs skittering away, leaving me trembling in its wake. As the adrenaline began to ebb, I couldn't help but feel a seething anger rising within me. My own family had subjected me to this torment, exploiting my fear for their own amusement. It was a betrayal that cut deep. That night, as I lay in bed, I couldn't shake the feeling of bugs crawling all over me. Every rustle of leaves outside seemed like a swarm of insects ready to pounce. My imagination ran wild, painting vivid, horrifying scenarios in the dark corners of my mind. But the worst was yet to come. As I tossed and turned, I noticed a shadowy figure standing at the foot of my bed. My heart pounded, my breath catching in my throat. I tried to call out, but no words came. It was as if the air had been sucked from the room. The figure moved closer, its features becoming clearer. It was me, but distorted, contorted into a grotesque, insect-like form. My skin was covered in chitin, my limbs twisted and segmented. It was a horrifying reflection of my deepest fears. I wanted to scream to escape from this living nightmare, but my body was paralyzed, held captive by the terror that gripped me. The figure drew nearer, its eyes locked onto mine, filled with a malevolence that sent shivers down my spine. Just as I thought I couldn't bear it any longer, the figure began to dissolve, like smoke in the wind. It faded into the darkness, leaving me gasping for breath, drenched in a cold sweat. Morning light filtered through the cabin windows, casting long, eerie shadows across the room. I sat up, my heart still racing, my mind reeling from the horrors I had witnessed. It was a nightmarish twist that I couldn't shake, a manifestation of my deepest fears. As I left the cabin, I couldn't look at my family the same way. They had taken my phobia, my greatest weakness, and turned it into a waking nightmare. It was a betrayal that cut deep, leaving scars that would linger long after the summer had ended. So here I am, sharing this tale with you, a cautionary reminder that fear can be a powerful weapon. It can twist reality, turning even the most familiar surroundings into a nightmare. And sometimes, the true horrors are the ones that lurk within our own minds, waiting to be unleashed. The crushing dread. Ever woken up in a place so strange, so utterly confined, that it feels like the walls are closing in on you? Well, let me tell you about one unforgettable night that shook me to my core. It all began with a seemingly innocent dream, but it soon turned into a nightmarish ordeal that I'll never forget. I found myself in a room, but it wasn't like any room I'd ever been in before. The walls were bare, painted a dull grey, and there was no furniture, no doors, no windows, just an empty, featureless space. Panic gnawed at me as I scanned the room, my heart racing. My breath quickened as I realized there was no way out. I pressed my hands against the walls, searching for a hidden exit, but they were solid and unyielding. The room seemed to close in on me, with every passing moment, the walls inching closer and closer. I could feel the suffocating fear of claustrophobia setting in. The room was relentless, squeezing the air from my lungs, my own mind turning against me. It was as if the walls were alive, maliciously taunting me with their relentless advance. I stumbled backward, my heart pounding in my chest, a cold sweat breaking out on my brow. I knew that if I didn't find a way out soon, the room would become my tomb. My thoughts raced, and I desperately wished for an escape. As the walls continued to close in, I felt a wave of dread wash over me. This was my worst nightmare, my deepest phobia, manifested before my very eyes. I had always been terrified of confined spaces, the feeling of being trapped, and now I was living that terror. But then, just as I thought I was about to be crushed, a flicker of realization washed over me. This was a dream, an incredibly vivid and nightmarish dream, but a dream nonetheless. I closed my eyes and focused all my willpower on waking up, on escaping this inescapable nightmare. With a jolt, I snapped awake, gasping for breath, my body drenched in sweat. I was back in my own bed, my room bathed in the gentle light of dawn. The walls were not closing in, and the suffocating dread of the dream began to ebb. Relief washed over me, but my heart still raced, and I couldn't shake the lingering unease that the dream had left behind. I knew it was just a product of my own fears, a manifestation of my phobia, that it had felt so real, so visceral. As I lay there, trying to calm my racing heart, I couldn't help but wonder what had triggered such a vivid nightmare. I had never experienced a dream so intense, so chilling. It was as if my own mind had conspired to terrify me. The day that followed was filled with a sense of unease, a feeling that the nightmare was still lurking just beneath the surface. I went about my routine, trying to shake off the lingering fear, but it clung to me like a shadow. Night fell once more, and I couldn't help but feel a sense of dread as I climbed into bed. I didn't want to relive the nightmare, to face my phobia in such a terrifying way, but as I closed my eyes, I felt the dream world pulling me back in. I found myself once again in that featureless room, the walls closing in on me with a relentless determination. A panic set in, and I knew I had to escape, but how? The dream seemed so real, so unforgiving. As the walls pressed closer, my heart pounded in my chest, and the weight of my phobia bore down on me. But then, a flicker of memory from the previous night's dream emerged, a realization that this was all in my mind. I closed my eyes and focused on the absurdity of the situation. I knew that dreams could be irrational, that they often played tricks on our fears. With every ounce of willpower I could muster, I pushed back against the dream, willing myself to wake up. Once again, I snapped awake in my own bed, gasping for breath, my body drenched in sweat. The room was unchanged, the walls not closing in. The nightmare had released its grip on me, and I was free. But the dread remained, a lingering feeling that my own mind had betrayed me. It was as if my phobia had been weaponized against me, turning the very essence of my being into a nightmare. I couldn't escape the feeling that something beyond my understanding was at play. And so, as I share this tale with you, I can't help but wonder about the mysteries of the mind, the power of our deepest fears, and the way our own thoughts can be both our greatest enemy and our salvation. The crushing dread of phobia can be a terrifying ordeal, one that lingers long after we wake from the nightmare. The Chamber of Phobias. Let me take you to a place where the darkness of the mind becomes a labyrinth of terror, a tale that begins with a seemingly innocuous curiosity, but soon spirals into a nightmare of unrelenting fear. It was a night I'll never forget, one that began with an insatiable desire for knowledge, but ended in a waking nightmare. I had always been a curious soul, eager to explore the hidden corners of the world. So when I stumbled upon an ancient manuscript that spoke of a chamber in the heart of an abandoned mansion, I couldn't resist the urge to investigate. The text hinted at the chamber being a place where one could confront their deepest fears, a challenge I was determined to undertake. As I made my way to the dilapidated mansion, I couldn't help but feel a mounting sense of trepidation. The air was heavy with a foreboding stillness, and the old walls of the mansion seemed to whisper secrets to anyone willing to listen. I had always been afraid of the unknown, and the mansion was the epitome of it. The chamber was said to contain objects, each representing a different phobia. The first object I came across was a cage filled with hissing snakes. I had never been particularly fond of these creatures, and the sight of them coiled and ready to strike sent a shiver down my spine. My heart raced, but I knew I couldn't let fear rule me. I reached out, gingerly touching the cage, forcing myself to confront the fear head-on. As I moved deeper into the chamber, I encountered other objects, a towering stack of crumbling books representing the fear of knowledge, a mirror reflecting my own image twisted into grotesque forms, symbolizing the fear of self, and a dark abyss that seemed to go on forever, embodying the fear of the unknown. Each object confronted me with a different phobia, each one challenging my courage. The further I delved into the chamber, the more intense my fear became. The objects seemed to feed off my anxiety, amplifying my dread with each passing moment. It was as if the room was a living, breathing entity, designed to terrify and break the spirit of anyone who dared to enter. As the chamber played on my deepest fears, I couldn't help but question my decision to confront them. The manuscript had mentioned that this ordeal was a path to self-discovery, a way to face and overcome my phobias. But the more I struggled, the more I felt like I was losing control. I reached a breaking point when I encountered a simple, unassuming box. The manuscript had described it as the fear of the unknown, and as I approached, I couldn't help but feel a gnawing dread in the pit of my stomach. I didn't know what might be inside, what might be lurking in the darkness. With trembling hands, I opened the box, and as I peered inside, my heart seemed to stop. It was empty, save for a single whispered question that echoed through the chamber. What do you fear the most? The question hung in the air, heavy with the weight of all my fears, and I realized that this was the heart of the chamber's test. It wasn't about confronting individual phobias, but about confronting the fear of fear itself. It was about acknowledging that fear was a part of life, an integral and unavoidable emotion. In that moment, I felt a profound shift within myself. The grip of my phobias began to loosen, and I understood that fear, in all its forms, was a natural part of the human experience. It was something to be understood and embraced, not something to be defeated. As I left the chamber, I couldn't help but feel a sense of peace and acceptance. I had come face to face with my deepest fears, and in doing so, I had conquered them in a way I had never thought possible. The mansion that had seemed so foreboding on my arrival now appeared welcoming, as if it had witnessed my transformation. But here's where the story takes a twist. Just as I thought my journey was over, I turned back to the chamber and discovered that there was no way out. The door had vanished, leaving me trapped in the very room that had once been my nightmare. Panic set in, and I scoured every corner of the chamber, searching for an exit. It seemed that the room itself had become my greatest phobia, a fear of confinement, of being trapped with no way out. I screamed for help, but my voice seemed to vanish into the depths of the chamber. The walls began to close in on me, echoing my greatest fear. The room itself had become my final, insurmountable phobia. As I write this, I am still trapped in that room, the walls inching closer with each passing moment. I have come to realize that the chamber was a test, not of my phobias, but of my ability to face them and emerge transformed. And as I confront my ultimate fear, the fear of confinement, I can't help but wonder if there is a lesson to be learned here, a deeper understanding of fear that still eludes me. So here I am, sharing this harrowing tale with you, a cautionary reminder that fear can be a powerful force both within and outside of us. It can drive us to confront our deepest phobias, but it can also become our greatest adversary. Sometimes, it's not the phobias themselves that we should fear, but our reaction to them, and the way they can shape our perception of reality. Shadows of the manor. Picture this, a quaint bed and breakfast, nestled on the outskirts of a quiet town. The promise of a peaceful retreat was what drew me here, but little did I know, the events that would unfold would shatter that illusion. From the moment I arrived, there was something off about the place. The manor, as it was quaintly named, exuded an eerie stillness. The air was thick with an unspoken tension, and the hushed whispers of the leaves seemed to echo with a hidden secret. As I stepped through the threshold, I was greeted by the host, a woman named Evelyn. Her smile was warm, but her eyes held a glint of something I couldn't quite place. It was as if she was harboring a secret, something she dared not reveal. The interior was a blend of old-world charm and faded elegance. Antique furniture stood as silent sentinels, their polished surfaces reflecting the dim light. The wallpaper, once vibrant, now bore the weight of years, its patterns faded and indistinct. I settled into my room, a space that exuded a peculiar energy. The air seemed to hang heavy, laden with the weight of forgotten histories. The bed, though neatly made, bore an indentation that spoke of countless nights and restless sleep. As twilight fell, a chill settled over the manor, seeping through the cracks in the walls. The wind whispered through the trees outside, a mournful lament that seemed to echo my own unease. I couldn't shake the feeling that something lurked just beyond the edges of my perception. That night, as I lay in bed, the silence pressed in on me, a suffocating presence that seemed to strangle the very air. Every crake of the floorboards, every sigh of the wind, sent shivers down my spine. It was as if the very walls held their breath, waiting for something to happen. And then, just as I was on the precipice of sleep, I heard it, a faint, muffled sound, like footsteps in the hallway. My heart raced, my senses on high alert. I strained to listen, but the sound had faded, leaving only the oppressive silence in its wake. Morning brought a false sense of normalcy. The sunlight streamed through the curtains, casting dappled patterns on the floor. I ventured downstairs, where Evelyn greeted me with a smile that seemed a touch too rehearsed. Her eyes held a glimmer of something I couldn't quite place. Was it guilt, or something darker? As the days passed, I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched, of unseen eyes lingering just beyond the edge of my vision. The manor seemed to close in around me, its walls bearing witness to a history I could only guess at. Each creak of the floorboards, each rustle of the curtains, sent my heart racing. One evening, as I wandered the dimly lit corridors, I stumbled upon a room, its door slightly ajar. I couldn't resist the urge to peek inside. The scene before me froze my blood, a tableau of faded photographs, each one a portrait of guests who had stayed at the manor before me. As I examined the images, a sinking feeling settled in the pit of my stomach. There was something off about the faces, something vacant, something haunting. It was as if their souls had been captured on film, frozen in a moment of quiet desperation. And then, just as I was about to turn away, I saw it, a photograph of Evelyn, her eyes cold and distant, her smile a mask of congeniality. It was a jarring contrast to the woman I had met, a glimpse of something darker that lurked beneath the surface. That night, as I lay in bed, the weight of the photographs pressed on me, a reminder of the secrets that the manor held. I couldn't escape the feeling that I was not alone, that the walls themselves bore witness to a history of darkness. And then, just as the clock struck midnight, I heard it again, the faint, muffled footsteps in the hallway. This time, I was determined to uncover the truth. I slipped from my room, heart pounding, and followed the sound down the corridor. As I rounded the corner, I was met with a sight that froze me in my tracks. There, in the dim light, stood Evelyn, her back to me, a figure of quiet malevolence. In her hand, she held a tarnished key, a relic of the manor's past. My breath caught in my throat as I watched her approach a door at the end of the hallway. With a turn of the key, she stepped inside, disappearing into the darkness beyond. It was a moment of surreal horror, a scene straight from a nightmare. I approached the door, my hand trembling as I turned the handle. The room beyond was a chamber of shadows, the air heavy with the weight of years. And there, in the center, stood a bed with a telltale indentation, a mark of countless nights and restless sleep. As my eyes adjusted to the darkness, I saw them, the photographs, arranged in a haunting display. Each one bore the faces of guests who had stayed at the manor, their eyes vacant, their souls captured in a moment of quiet desperation. It was a gallery of lost souls, a testament to the darkness that the manor held. And then, just as realization settled over me, I heard it, the soft click of a door closing, followed by the unmistakable sound of footsteps approaching. I turned, my heart pounding, to face Evelyn, her eyes cold and calculating. It was then that I understood the truth, that the manor was not a place of rest, but a trap for the unsuspecting. Evelyn had lured guests with the promise of solace, only to ensnare them in a web of darkness. As she advanced, I knew that my own fate was sealed. The walls of the manor bore witness to a history of horrors, and now they would bear witness to mine. I was just another face in the photographs, just another lost soul swallowed by the shadows. So here I am, my friend, sharing this tale with you, a cautionary reminder that sometimes the most inviting exteriors hide the darkest secrets. The manor was not a sanctuary, but a prison, a place where the line between reality and nightmare blurred. As I face the inevitable, I can't help but wonder about the countless others who have met their end within these walls. Their stories, like mine, are now woven into the tapestry of darkness that the manor holds, and as the footsteps draw nearer, I can only hope that this tale serves as a warning to to tread carefully, for not all doors lead to sanctuary, and not all smiles hold benevolence. Whispers in the night. All right, my friend, grab a seat and listen up. I've got a story that'll make your hair stand on end. It all happened one fateful night at a quaint bed and breakfast that promised a cozy retreat from the chaos of everyday life. Little did I know, it was a promise that would shatter in the most chilling way. The place, Oak Ridge Manor, had a charm that belied its modern exterior. Nestled at the edge of a sleepy town, it boasted all the amenities you'd expect, but as the sun dipped below the horizon, things took a turn. The air grew cold, and the once inviting atmosphere now held a subtle undercurrent of unease. That first night, I heard it, a soft rustle, a whisper in the darkness. It was nothing out of the ordinary, just the settling of an old building, or so I told myself. I tried to brush it off, attributing it to the quirks of an aging structure. As I settled into my room, I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. The walls seemed to hold secrets, and the shadows danced like spectres in the dim light. Every crake of the floorboards, every distant echo, sent a shiver down my spine. But it was when the clock struck midnight, things took a turn for the worse. The air grew heavy, and the room seemed to pulse with an energy I couldn't explain. That soft rustle grew louder, evolving into a series of eerie whispers that seemed to echo in the silence. I tossed and turned, my mind racing with 1,000 questions. Was it just my imagination playing tricks on me, or was there something more sinister at play? I couldn't shake the feeling that I was not alone, that there was a presence in the room with me. The following nights brought more of the same, the whispers, the cold drafts, the unshakable feeling of being watched. It was as if the manor itself held a secret, one that it was dying to share. I couldn't help but wonder about the history of the place. Had others experienced these strange occurrences? Had there been reports of paranormal activity? I couldn't shake the feeling that the answers were hidden within the walls of Oak Ridge Manor. One evening, as I ventured downstairs, I struck up a conversation with the owner, Mrs. Thompson. She was a kind, unassuming woman, but her eyes held a hint of sadness. When I asked about the history of the manor, she hesitated, as if choosing her words carefully. As she spoke, she revealed that the manor had a long and storied past, with tales of strange happenings and unexplained phenomena. It was said that a spirit roamed the halls at night, a restless soul searching for something long lost. The locals spoke of it in hushed tones, a legend that had become woven into the fabric of the town. As Mrs. Thompson spoke, I couldn't help but feel a chill run down my spine. It was as if the very air held the weight of the past, and the spirit's presence seemed to grow more palpable with every passing night. That night, as I lay in bed, I could feel it, the energy in the room, the whispers that seemed to brush against my skin. It was as if the spirit was trying to communicate, to share its story with an eager listener. And then, just as I was about to surrender to the darkness, I saw it, a figure standing at the foot of my bed, its form shrouded in shadow. My heart raced, my breath caught in my throat. I tried to speak, to ask who it was, but the words caught in my mouth. The figure advanced, its movements slow and deliberate. I could feel its gaze on me, a weighty presence that seemed to bore into my very soul. Panic surged through me, but I was paralyzed, unable to move, unable to escape. And then, just as it seemed the figure would reach out and touch me, it vanished. The room fell into an eerie silence, the air heavy with a sense of foreboding. I was alone once more, left to grapple with the reality of what I had just experienced. The following days were a blur of restless nights and anxious days. The spirit's presence seemed to grow stronger, its attempts at communication more desperate. It was as if it was trying to convey something, to share a message that had been locked away for far too long. As the nights wore on, I couldn't shake the feeling that the spirit's intentions were not benevolent. There was a darkness that clung to it, a malevolence that sent shivers down my spine. It was a presence that seemed to hunger for something that it believed I could provide. And then one fateful night, as the clock struck midnight, I saw it, the figure, standing at the foot of my bed once more. But this time there was something different in its eyes, something that filled me with a bone-deep dread. As it advanced, I knew that my time was running out. The spirit's intentions were clear. It wanted something from me, something that I couldn't comprehend. I tried to scream, to flee, but I was powerless, trapped in a nightmare of my own making. And then, just as the figure was about to reach me, a blinding light filled the room, banishing the darkness. When I opened my eyes, I was no longer in the manor. I was back in the safety of my own home. The events of that night, nothing more than a distant memory. I couldn't shake the feeling of relief, of gratitude for being back in familiar surroundings. But as I looked back on my time at Oak Ridge Manor, I couldn't help but wonder about the spirit, about its story and the darkness that had consumed it. So, my friend, heed my warning. There are places in this world where the line between the living and the dead is thin, where the past lingers like a haunting melody. Oak Ridge Manor was one such place, a place where the spirits of the past sought solace in the present. And as I sit here, recounting this tale to you, I can't help but wonder about the spirit, about the darkness that consumed it. Was it a lost soul searching for redemption, or something more sinister? The answers, I fear, will remain locked within the walls of Oak Ridge Manor, a secret that only the spirits themselves hold. Shadows of imagination. All right, lean in close, because I've got a story that'll have you questioning reality. It all started at the Whispering Pines Bed and Breakfast, a charming little place tucked away in the countryside. The moment I set foot inside, I could feel a sense of tranquility wash over me, the kind that only an old, well-loved establishment can provide. The innkeeper, Mrs. Davenport, was a warm, welcoming soul. She had that special knack for making you feel like a long-lost friend, and her eyes twinkled with a mischief that hinted at years of untold stories. My room was a quaint haven, bathed in soft golden light. The antique furniture seemed to whisper tales of generations gone by, and the bed looked like it had cradled the dreams of countless travelers. I settled in, the scent of fresh linens lulling me into a sense of calm. The first night was uneventful, the only sounds being the rustle of leaves and the distant hoot of an owl. It was as idyllic as one could hope for, the kind of night that lulls you into a peaceful slumber. But then, as the second night fell, things started to shift. It began with a crake, a subtle noise that seemed to come from the hallway. I brushed it off as the settling of an old building, but as the night wore on, the noises grew more pronounced. Footsteps echoed through the corridor, soft and deliberate, like someone pacing back and forth. My heart quickened, and I found myself straining to hear more, my senses on high alert. As the days passed, the occurrences became more frequent. Objects would shift ever so slightly, as if moved by an unseen hand. Shadows seemed to dance in the corners of my vision, disappearing when I turned to look. I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched, of unseen eyes lingering just beyond my line of sight. The air seemed to hum with an unspoken energy, a presence that I couldn't quite define. I decided to confide in Mrs. Davenport, thinking she might have an explanation for these strange events. When I broached the subject, her eyes twinkled with a knowing glint. "Oh dear, you've encountered our resident ghost, haven't you?" she said, her tone matter-of-fact. "Don't worry, she means no harm. She's been here for as long as I can remember, just keeping an eye on things." I felt a chill run down my spine, but Mrs. Davenport's reassurance put me somewhat at ease. She explained that the ghost was believed to be the spirit of a former guest, a woman who loved the inn so much that she couldn't bear to leave. As the nights passed, I began to feel a strange sense of camaraderie with the ghost. It was as if we shared the space in peaceful harmony, each of us respecting the other's presence. One evening I even thought I caught a glimpse of her, a faint figure in a flowing gown, her presence ethereal and serene. She seemed to smile at me, a gesture that filled me with a sense of comfort. But then, one fateful night, everything changed. I awoke to a sensation of icy fingers on my skin, a touch that sent a jolt of terror through me. I sat up, my heart pounding, but the room was empty, the air still and silent. I couldn't shake the feeling of dread that settled over me. It was as if the atmosphere had shifted, the peaceful coexistence I had come to know replaced by an unsettling tension. As the days passed, the ghost's presence seemed to grow more pronounced. I could feel her watching me, her gaze heavy with an intensity I couldn't understand. It was as if something had changed, as if a darkness had settled over the inn. I decided to do some research, hoping to uncover the truth behind the ghost's identity. I combed through old records, searching for any mention of a woman who had stayed at the inn and met an untimely end. But the more I searched, the more I came up empty-handed. There was no record of a woman matching the description, no trace of a guest who had left a lasting mark on the inn. Doubt gnawed at me, a nagging feeling that something wasn't right. Had I imagined the whole thing? Had my own mind played tricks on me, conjuring a ghost from thin air? That night, as I lay in bed, I couldn't shake the feeling of unease. The room seemed to close in around me, the air heavy with a sense of foreboding. I could feel the weight of the unknown pressing down on me, a presence that I couldn't define. And then, just as I was about to surrender to the darkness, I saw her, the ghost, standing at the foot of my bed, her eyes filled with a sadness I couldn't comprehend. It was a moment frozen in time, a tableau of haunting beauty. But then, in the blink of an eye, she was gone. The room fell into an eerie silence, the air thick with a sense of finality. I knew then that the truth was far more complex than I could have ever imagined. As I sit here, sharing this tale with you, I can't help but wonder about the nature of reality, about the thin line between the tangible and the imagined. The whispering pine's bed and breakfast holds a secret, one that may never be fully understood. So, my friend, the next time you find yourself in a place that seems too good to be true, remember this story. Reality can be a slippery thing, and sometimes the things we can't explain are the ones that stay with us the longest. The verdant terror. All right, gather round, because what I'm about to tell you is not for the faint of heart. It's a story that begins in the heart of the Amazon, where the wilderness is as beautiful as it is deadly. You see, I thought I was prepared for anything. I'd read up on survival tactics, watched every documentary I could get my hands on. But nothing could have prepared me for what awaited deep within the jungle. Our expedition started with the promise of uncovering ancient artifacts, lost to time amidst the lush vegetation. The moment we set foot on that rainforest floor, I could feel the intensity of the wild, the hum of life all around. Every step seemed to echo with the promise of discovery, and the scent of damp earth hung heavy in the air. As the days passed, we trekked deeper, the green canopy above growing thicker and more imposing. The calls of exotic birds and the rustling of unseen creatures became our soundtrack. It was enchanting in a way, but beneath the surface, a primal energy pulsed, a reminder that we were mere guests in this untamed realm. One morning, as the mist clung to the underbrush, we stumbled upon a clearing, an eerie expanse of gnarled trees and twisted vines. It felt like we'd entered another world entirely, a realm untouched by time. It was here that I first sensed a shift, a change in the atmosphere. The air grew still, and a foreboding sense of unease settled over our group. I could hear my own heart pounding in my chest as we pushed forward, determined to uncover the secrets this place held. But the deeper we ventured, the more I felt like an intruder, an unwelcome guest in this ancient domain. Suddenly, the silence was shattered by a cacophony of guttural growls and frenzied screeches. My blood ran cold as I turned to face a nightmarish sight, a horde of animals, eyes wild and frenzied, charging toward us with a madness that seemed to defy nature itself. Instinct took over, and I sprinted through the underbrush, my heart pounding in my chest. But the jungle seemed to conspire against me, every vine and root tangling at my feet. I could hear the cries of my companions, their terror echoing through the trees, but there was no time to look back. As the rabbit horde closed in, I could feel the hot breath of their snarling maws. Adrenaline surged through my veins, my mind racing for a way out. It was a nightmare come to life, a scene straight from a horror film. Just when I thought all hope was lost, I stumbled upon a hidden alcove, a small hollow in the ancient roots of a colossal tree. It was a stroke of luck, a glimmer of hope in the darkness. I pressed myself into the alcove, breath held, heart pounding, as the horde thundered past. Time seemed to stretch, each second an eternity, until at last the sounds of pursuit faded into the distance. I remained crouched in that alcove, unable to move, unable to process the nightmare that had just unfolded. Hours passed, and the jungle fell back into an uneasy quiet. I cautiously emerged from my hiding place, my senses heightened, every rustle of leaves sending a jolt of fear through me. My companions were nowhere to be seen, swallowed by the relentless green. I stumbled through the underbrush, a sense of dread settling over me. The jungle seemed to close in around me, as if it were alive, watching, waiting. It was a feeling of being hunted, of being at the mercy of a force beyond my understanding. And then, just as I thought I couldn't bear it any longer, I came upon a shocking sight. There, in a small clearing, stood my companions. They were alive, unharmed, their faces a mixture of relief and disbelief. It was a plot twist I hadn't seen coming. Somehow, they had found a way to evade the rabid horde, to navigate the treacherous terrain. They greeted me with wide-eyed astonishment, as if they'd seen a ghost. As we regrouped and made our way back to civilization, I couldn't shake the feeling of the jungle's malevolence, the sense that it had tested us, pushed us to our limits. It was a place of untold mysteries, a realm where the line between reality and nightmare blurred. So here I am, sharing this tale with you, a cautionary reminder that the wild is a force to be reckoned with, a realm of beauty and terror intertwined. The jungle is a place of unimaginable wonders, but it's also a realm where survival is never guaranteed. It's a lesson I learned the hard way, a reminder that sometimes the greatest horrors are the ones that lurk just beyond our understanding. Shadows of the canopy. All right, grab a seat, my friend, because what I'm about to share with you is a journey into the heart of darkness itself. Picture this, a dense, ancient jungle where every shadow holds a secret and the very air hums with an unspoken warning. It all began with the promise of adventure, but little did we know that we were about to embark on a descent into madness. As we trekked deeper into the verdant expanse, the sunlight dimmed, casting eerie, dappled patterns on the forest floor. The air grew heavy with the scent of earth and decay, and the calls of unseen creatures echoed through the trees. It was the kind of place that whispered secrets to those willing to listen. The first signs of trouble were subtle, nervous glances, furtive whispers that seemed to vanish on the breeze. It was as if the jungle itself was watching, waiting for the first crack in our resolve. We brushed it off, attributing it to the natural unease that comes with exploring the unknown. As the days passed, however, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. My companions, once eager and adventurous, grew increasingly silent, their eyes darting nervously at shadows only they could see. It was as if an invisible weight pressed down on their shoulders, a silent force that eroded their sanity. One night, as we set up camp beneath the sprawling canopy, I saw it, a fleeting glimpse of movement just beyond the edge of our campfire's glow. My heart pounded in my chest, and I grabbed my flashlight, determined to uncover the source. But when I stepped into the darkness, there was nothing, just the rustle of leaves and the distant calls of nocturnal creatures. As the days wore on, the sense of unease grew more palpable. My companions whispered in hushed tones, their voices tinged with paranoia. It was as if the jungle itself had seeped into their minds, casting shadows on their sanity. Then, one fateful evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon and the forest fell into an inky blackness, all hell broke loose. I awoke to frantic shouts and the sound of scuffling. My heart raced as I fumbled for my flashlight, the beam revealing a nightmare I could scarcely believe. My companions had turned on each other, their eyes wide with terror, their faces twisted with madness. It was a frenzy of limbs and desperate cries, a scene straight from a nightmare. I could feel my own sanity teetering on the edge as I watched, paralyzed with horror. Instinct took over, and I fled into the night, the sounds of their frenzied struggle echoing in my ears. I didn't look back. I couldn't. It was as if the very fabric of reality had unraveled, leaving only chaos in its wake. I stumbled through the underbrush, my breath racked, my heart pounding in my chest. The jungle seemed to close in around me, the shadows taking on a life of their own. Every rustle of leaves, every distant call of an unseen creature, seemed like a cruel taunt. Hours passed, though it felt like an eternity. The jungle had become a labyrinth of twisted vines and looming shadows, each step a battle against the encroaching darkness. I could feel the weight of isolation, the understanding that I was utterly alone in this unforgiving realm. Just when I thought I couldn't bear it any longer, I stumbled upon a small clearing, bathed in the silvery light of the moon. In the center stood an ancient, gnarled tree, its roots winding into the earth like the fingers of some forgotten deity. It was a surreal oasis in the midst of the chaos, a sanctuary in the heart of madness. I collapsed at the base of the tree, my breath coming in racked gasps. The world seemed to spin around me, the sounds of the jungle muffled by the pounding of my own heart. I knew that I couldn't stay here forever, that I had to find a way out, but for now, the tree offered a respite from the horrors that lurked just beyond. As the night wore on, I couldn't shake the feeling that the jungle was alive, a malevolent force that watched and waited. It was as if the very essence of the forest had turned against us, a testament to the unforgiving nature of the wild. And then, just as I thought I couldn't bear it any longer, a new realization washed over me. I was not alone. In the distance, I could see them, the shadows of my fallen companions, their forms flickering in and out of the darkness. It was a haunting sight, a reminder of the horrors that had unfolded. As I stared into their vacant eyes, a sense of dread settled over me. Whatever had taken hold of them, whatever had driven them to madness, still lurked in the depths of the jungle. It was a force beyond my understanding, a malevolence that defied explanation. And so, here I am recounting this tale to you, a cautionary reminder that the wild is a realm of untold mysteries, a place where the line between reality and nightmare blurs. The jungle is a force to be reckoned with, a realm where survival is never guaranteed. As I sit beneath the ancient tree, I can't help but wonder what awaits me in the depths of the darkness. The shadows seem to dance and shift, whispering secrets that I can't quite comprehend. It's a feeling of being watched, of being at the mercy of a force beyond my understanding. So heed my words, my friend, and remember that there are places in this world where the line between reality and nightmare is razor thin. The jungle is a realm of beauty and terror intertwined, a place where the shadows hold secrets that may never be revealed. And as I sit here, gazing into the depths of the canopy, I can't help but wonder if I will ever escape this living nightmare. Echoes of the forgotten. All right, gather round, my friend, because I'm about to take you on a journey that you won't soon forget. It all started in the heart of a jungle so thick, the trees seemed to swallow the very sunlight. The air hung heavy with moisture, and every step was a venture into the unknown. From the moment we set foot on that untamed soil, I knew this expedition was like no other. The jungle seemed to pulse with an ancient energy, as if it held secrets that time itself had forgotten. It was both exhilarating and unnerving, like being on the edge of a precipice, unsure of what lay beyond. As we ventured deeper, the verdant world closed in around us. Vines twisted and curled, their tendrils reaching out like the fingers of a forgotten spectre. The calls of exotic birds echoed through the trees, a symphony of nature's mysteries. It was beautiful in its own wild, untamed way. The first oddity we stumbled upon was a peculiar stone, its surface etched with symbols that seemed to shimmer in the dappled light. I couldn't shake the feeling that it held a significance beyond our understanding. My fingers traced the grooves, the cool touch sending a shudder down my spine. With every step, we discovered stranger and stranger objects, ancient idols half buried in the earth, carvings that seemed to depict scenes from a forgotten mythology, and relics that pulsed with an energy I couldn't quite explain. It was as if the jungle itself was guiding us, leading us deeper into its enigmatic heart. As we pressed on, the air grew thick with a sense of anticipation, as if the very ground beneath our feet held its breath. We stumbled upon a clearing, and there, amidst the towering trees, stood a structure unlike anything I'd ever seen. It was a testament to the skill and artistry of an ancient tribe, its walls adorned with intricate carvings that seemed to come alive in the dappled light. My heart raced as I stepped inside, the air heavy with the weight of centuries. The walls seemed to hum with a low rhythmic energy, as if the very essence of the tribe still lingered within. It was both awe-inspiring and unsettling, like standing on the threshold of a forgotten realm. As I explored further, I couldn't help but wonder about the people who had built this place, the stories they must have told, the rituals they must have performed. It was a glimpse into a world long gone, a window into a time when the jungle was not a place of mystery, but a home. But as the hours passed, a creeping sense of unease settled over me. It was as if the very walls of the structure were closing in, a suffocating weight pressing down on my chest. I could hear my own breath echoing in the silence, the sound sharp and hollow against the ancient stone. Then, just as I was about to turn and leave, I heard it, a faint whisper, a murmur that seemed to rise from the very walls themselves. It was a sound that chilled me to the bone, a voice from the depths of the past, speaking a language I couldn't understand. Fear gripped me, my heart pounding in my chest. I turned to leave, but the entrance seemed to have vanished, replaced by an unyielding wall of stone. Panic set in, my breath coming in racked gasps. I was trapped, alone in this cursed structure, with no way out. As I frantically searched for an exit, the whispers grew louder, a chorus of voices that seemed to echo through the very stones. They spoke of ancient rites, of dark rituals, of a power that should never have been awakened. It was a tale of hubris and consequence, a warning from a time long past. And then, just as I was about to surrender to the suffocating darkness, a glimmer of hope. I spotted a faint outline on the far wall, a hidden passage, concealed by centuries of neglect. With renewed determination, I pressed forward, my fingers brushing against the cool stone. The passage led me deeper into the heart of the structure, the air growing colder and more oppressive with every step. The whispers grew louder, their words a cacophony of warning and despair. It was as if the very walls were trying to dissuade me, to send me back from whence I came. But I couldn't turn back. I had to know, had to uncover the truth that lay hidden within this cursed place. And so, with trembling hands and a heart heavy with dread, I pressed on, the darkness closing in around me. And then, at last, I reached the heart of the structure, a chamber bathed in an otherworldly light. Before me stood an altar, its surface etched with symbols that pulsed with a faint, eerie glow. It was a sight that defied explanation, a convergence of the ancient and the supernatural. As I approached, I could feel the energy in the air, a hum that seemed to resonate with my very soul. It was a force beyond my understanding, a power that had been dormant for centuries, waiting for the right moment to awaken. And then, just as I reached out to touch the altar, a blinding light filled the chamber, a force that seemed to emanate from the very stones themselves. I was lifted from my feet, suspended in a whirlwind of energy and light. It was a sensation both exhilarating and terrifying, like being at the mercy of a force beyond my control. And then, as suddenly as it had begun, it was over. I found myself standing back in the clearing, the structure behind me reduced to rubble. It was as if the jungle itself had reclaimed its secret, erasing all traces of the cursed place. As I stood there, catching my breath, I couldn't help but wonder about the power that had been unleashed, the force that had slumbered for centuries. It was a reminder that some mysteries are not meant to be unraveled, that there are forces in this world that defy explanation. And so, as I share this tale with you, I do so as a warning, a cautionary reminder that there are places in this world where the line between reality and the supernatural is razor thin. The jungle is a realm of ancient secrets, a place where the past and the present converge. And as I stand here, gazing at the ruins of that cursed structure, I can't help but wonder what other mysteries lie hidden within the heart of the wild. The haunting of Evelyn's doll. You know the feeling you get when you step into an old attic, dust motes dancing in the slivers of light. That eerie stillness, like the past, is holding its breath. Well, that's where my story begins. In that attic, beneath a tattered sheet, lay a relic from another era, a vintage doll named Evelyn. Evelyn wasn't like any doll you find on a toy store shelf. Her porcelain skin was cracked, her glassy eyes held secrets, and her once luxurious dress was faded, threadbare. I couldn't help but wonder about the child who once cherished her, who whispered secrets into her porcelain ears. You see, my curiosity got the better of me, and I couldn't just leave Evelyn in that dark, forgotten attic. So, I brought her down, dusted her off, and placed her on a small wooden chair in my bedroom. I figured she'd add a touch of vintage charm to the place. As the days passed, strange things began to happen. I'd hear faint giggles echoing through the house, like a child at play. Sometimes, I'd find tiny footprints in the dust, leading from Evelyn's chair to the window. But there was no one else in the house, just me. I told myself it was just my imagination, that the old house was settling, creaking and groaning. But then came the whispers. Late at night, when the wind howled outside, I'd hear soft, melodic murmurs. It was as if Evelyn herself was speaking, her voice like a lullaby from a bygone era. One night, unable to bear the mystery any longer, I sat beside Evelyn and spoke to her. "What secrets do you hold, dear doll?" I murmured, half expecting the walls to close in on me. Suddenly, a chill swept through the room, raising goosebumps on my skin. The air seemed to thicken, and I held my breath. And then, as clear as day, I heard a voice, a child's voice, whispering in my ear. Find me, it pleaded. My heart raced. It wasn't a hallucination. Evelyn was alive, in some strange, ghostly way. But find what, and who was the voice calling for? Determined to unravel the mystery, I delved into the history of the house. It didn't take long to uncover the tragic tale of the previous owners, a family torn apart by loss. Evelyn, it seemed, belonged to a little girl named Emily, who disappeared one stormy night, never to be seen again. That night, I sat in the attic, surrounded by forgotten relics, and I felt a connection. I knew I had to find Emily, for her and for Evelyn. The attic seemed to pulse with energy, urging me on. As days turned into weeks, my search led me to a small cemetery on the outskirts of town. Emily's gravestone stood weathered and alone, a testament to a life cut short. I knelt beside it, heart heavy with sorrow. Suddenly, a gust of wind whipped through the trees, and the world seemed to blur. I blinked, and when my vision cleared, I found myself in a different place altogether. It was a moonlit garden, overgrown with ivy and roses, and there, standing before me, was Emily. She looked just as she must have on that fateful night, her eyes wide with innocence. She took my hand, her touch cold but filled with longing. "Thank you for finding me," she whispered. I couldn't find my voice. Emily led me to a small, forgotten shed at the edge of the garden. With trembling hands, I pushed the door open, revealing a dusty, forgotten chest. As I opened it, my breath caught. Inside lay a collection of letters, diaries, and a faded photograph of a happy family. It was Emily's, a glimpse into a life that should have been. The truth was heart-wrenching. Emily's father, consumed by grief, had hidden away all memories of his daughter, unable to bear the pain. As I returned to the attic with the newfound treasures, Evelyn seemed to glow with a strange warmth. It was as if the doll herself held a piece of Emily's spirit. Placing the photograph beside Evelyn, a strange sensation washed over me. The air grew heavy with anticipation, and I felt Emily's presence, a comforting presence, surrounding us. In that moment, the room seemed to come alive with a soft, ethereal light. I watched in awe as Evelyn's cracked porcelain began to mend, her glassy eyes gleaming with newfound life. And then, with the final radiant glow, Emily's voice echoed one last time. "Thank you," she said, her words filled with gratitude and peace. As the light faded, I knew the bond between Emily and Evelyn was finally complete. They had found each other, and in doing so, they found a way to touch the world once more. And so, my dear reader, when you stumble upon forgotten relics, when the past calls out to you, don't be afraid. There are stories waiting to be told, connections waiting to be made, and sometimes, in the quietest corners of our lives, we find the most extraordinary magic. The whispering howling. You ever stumble upon something in the attic that sends shivers down your spine? That's what happened to me when I uncovered that old, dusty trunk. And what was inside? A vintage doll, its porcelain face etched with a permanent smile that seemed just a touch too wide. I swear those glassy eyes followed me as I carried it downstairs. I didn't think much of it at first. Just another forgotten relic, right? But then, as the night settled in, strange things began to happen. I'd hear soft footsteps in the hallway, like tiny feet padding against the hardwood floor. And when I'd peek out, there it was, Eloise, as I'd named her, sitting on the living room couch, her eyes gleaming in the moonlight. Now, I'm not one to scare easily, but there's something about a doll that moves on its own that will send a shiver straight up your spine. I'd put Eloise back in her place, convinced it was just my imagination playing tricks on me. But every morning, there she'd be, in a new spot, as if she had a mind of her own. The rational part of my brain fought with the rising unease. I'd scrutinize the doll, convinced there must be some hidden mechanism, a string or a wire, that explained it all. But Eloise was just a doll, or so it seemed. Then came the whispers. I'd wake in the dead of night to a soft melodic murmur, like a lullaby from a ghostly nursery. My heart pounded, sweat prickling my skin as I strained to catch the words. It was like trying to grasp at smoke, slipping through my fingers. One night, I couldn't take it anymore. I picked up Eloise, her porcelain skin cool against my trembling fingers, and I looked into those unblinking eyes. "What do you want from me?" I asked, half expecting the walls to close in on me. Suddenly, a chill swept through the room, raising goosebumps on my skin. The air seemed to thicken, and I held my breath. And then, as clear as day, I heard a voice, a child's voice, whispering in my ear. Find me, it pleaded. My heart raced. It wasn't a hallucination. Eloise was alive, in some strange, ghostly way. But find what? And who was the voice calling for? Days turned into weeks as I searched for answers. I combed through old records, newspapers, anything that might shed light on the doll's past. And then, buried deep in the archives, I found it, the story of a little girl named Emily, who disappeared without a trace. Emily's family had lived in this very house generations ago. The attic, now filled with forgotten relics, was once her sanctuary. Could it be that Emily's spirit lingered within Eloise? Armed with this new knowledge, I returned to my home, determined to unravel the mystery. I sat with Eloise, speaking softly to her, hoping to reach the restless soul within. "Emily, if you're here, show me the way." The room grew still, the air heavy with anticipation. And then a soft glow emanated from Eloise, casting an otherworldly light across the room. My heart pounded, the moment charged with an eerie electricity. In that instant, the room transformed. I was no longer sitting in my living room, but in a moonlit garden, overgrown with ivy and roses. And there, standing before me, was Emily. She looked just as she must have on that fateful night, her eyes wide with innocence. She took my hand, her touch cold but filled with longing. "Thank you for finding me," she whispered. I couldn't find my voice. Emily led me to a small, forgotten shed at the edge of the garden. With trembling hands, I pushed the door open, revealing a dusty, forgotten chest. As I opened it, my breath caught. Inside lay a collection of letters, diaries, and a faded photograph of a happy family. It was Emily's, a glimpse into a life that should have been. The truth was heart-wrenching. Emily's father, consumed by grief, had hidden away all memories of his daughter, unable to bear the pain. As I returned to the attic with the newfound treasures, Eloise seemed to glow with a strange warmth. It was as if the doll herself held a piece of Emily's spirit. Placing the photograph beside Eloise, a strange sensation washed over me. The air grew heavy with anticipation, and I felt Emily's presence, a comforting presence, surrounding us. In that moment, the room seemed to come alive with a soft, ethereal light. I watched in awe as Eloise's cracked porcelain began to mend, her glassy eyes gleaming with newfound life. And then, with a final radiant glow, Emily's voice echoed one last time. "Thank you," she said, her words filled with gratitude and peace. As the light faded, I knew the bond between Emily and Eloise was finally complete. They had found each other, and in doing so, they found a way to touch the world once more. And so, my dear reader, when you stumble upon forgotten relics, when the past calls out to you, don't be afraid. There are stories waiting to be told, connections waiting to be made, and sometimes, in the quietest corners of our lives, we find the most extraordinary magic. The Haunting of Gracefield Manor. It was a bitter winter's night when I first laid eyes on that doll. Gracefield Manor, with its dark, looming silhouette against the moonlit sky, held secrets in every creaking floorboard. And there, in the dimly lit attic, amidst forgotten relics and dusty memories, she stood, an elegant porcelain doll, her features worn but somehow still hauntingly beautiful. I'm not one to spook easily, but this doll had an aura about her that sent a shiver down my spine. Her glassy eyes seemed to hold a melancholy depth, and her painted smile, once radiant, had faded into a twisted grin. I could feel the weight of her history, of all the little hands, but had once cherished her. I brought her down to my study, thinking she might add a touch of vintage charm to the room. But as night fell, so did an unsettling feeling. It started with a whisper, so faint I thought it a trick of the wind against the window pane. But then, clear as day, I heard it, a soft lilting voice, as if the doll herself was speaking. "Hello," she said, her voice a breathy sigh that seemed to hang in the air. My heart raced, my breath hitching in my throat. It was impossible. Dolls don't talk, but there was no denying what I heard. "Who are you?" I managed to stammer, my voice barely above a whisper. "I'm Clara," she replied, her porcelain lips not moving an inch. "And I've been waiting for you." A chill ran down my spine. My rational mind fought against the rising dread. It had to be some sort of elaborate trick, an illusion. But Clara's eyes seemed to lock onto mine, holding me in a silent gaze. That night, as the clock struck midnight, I heard more voices. Whispers from the shadows, laughter that seemed to dance just beyond the edge of my senses. It was as if the very walls of Gracefield Manor held secrets that Clara had somehow awakened. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching me, that the air held a heavy, unseen presence. I felt the weight of countless eyes, all fixed on me, and I couldn't escape the feeling that Clara was the conduit for their gaze. Days turned into sleepless nights, my month's orderly study now filled with the haunting presence of imaginary guests. Clara, her voice a soothing balm, introduced me to her companions, a gruff old soldier named Theodore, a demure lady in lace named Abigail, and a mischievous young lad named Samuel. They became my silent confidants, my spectral companions in this twilight realm. But with every passing day, their voices grew louder, their presence more palpable. It was as if they were demanding something I couldn't quite fathom. One fateful night, as the moon hung low in the sky, Clara spoke with a sense of urgency. "You must help us," she implored, her porcelain face etched with desperation. The word sent a jolt through me. Help them? How? The questions swirled in my mind, drowning out reason. And then, with a sudden gut-wrenching clarity, I understood. They were trapped, tethered to this manor, unable to find peace. They needed closure, a release from the chains that bound them to this world. Armed with newfound purpose, I delved into the history of Gracefield Manor. The answers lay buried in forgotten diaries and dusty ledgers. I pieced together the story of family torn apart by tragedy, of secrets that festered like a wound. With each revelation, the voices grew stronger, urging me forward. The weight of their pain became my own, driving me to uncover the truth. And then in the cold, unforgiving light of the attic, I found it, the final piece of the puzzle, a letter written in trembling script. The ink faded, but the words still searing with anguish. As I read the words aloud, a tremor passed through the air. The room seemed to hold its breath, waiting for the moment of release. Then it came, a rush of wind, a chorus of voices, and a blinding light that filled every corner of the attic. I felt a strange sense of weightlessness, as if I were floating on a sea of memories. When I opened my eyes, I was standing in a moonlit garden, overgrown with ivy and roses. Before me stood the figures from my study, Clara, Theodore, Abigail, and Samuel. Their eyes gleamed with a newfound radiance, their faces alight with gratitude. "Thank you," Clara whispered, her voice no longer haunting, but filled with warmth and light. And as quickly as it had begun, the garden faded, replaced by the familiar attic of Gracefield Manor. Clara, Theodore, Abigail, and Samuel were gone, their voices now silent. I returned to my study, the weight of their absence settling in. The vintage doll Clara stood there, her porcelain face serene once more. She was just a doll, after all, and yet, as I looked into those glassy eyes, I couldn't help but feel a sense of bittersweet farewell. They had found their peace, and in doing so, they had given me a gift, an understanding that sometimes The past carries a weight that can only be lifted by those willing to listen. The happiest place. You ever have one of those trips where you just know something's off? Well, let me tell you about the time my friends and I went to Disneyland. Picture this: Main Street, USA, sun setting behind Sleeping Beauty Castle, the scent of charros in the air. Sounds perfect, right? But from the get-go, there was this strange undercurrent, like a shiver you can't shake. As we strolled through the park, I couldn't help but notice the characters. Something about Mickey and Minnie, Goofy and Pluto. It was like they were off, their eyes a bit too intense, smiles stretched just a tad too wide. I chalked it up to over-enthusiastic performers, but the unease gnawed at me. Nightfall brought a chill, but it wasn't just the temperature. The park took on a different vibe, shadows stretching across the pathways, the laughter of children echoing eerily. We decided to hit Space Mountain, hoping the thrill of the ride would shake off our jitters. As we waited in line, I couldn't help but notice the other visitors. A family in matching shirts, a couple holding hands, the usual Disneyland crowd, but their expressions were off, blank, vacant stares, like they were sleepwalking through the happiest place on earth. It sent a shiver down my spine. Finally, we boarded the ride. The darkness swallowed us, the sound of our own breath, the only thing breaking the silence. But then, from somewhere deep within the ride, came a guttural growl, low and menacing. I felt the hairs on the back of my neck stand on end. I turned to my friends, their faces pale, eyes wide. "Did you hear that?" I whispered. They nodded, but before we could react, the ride jerked to a stop. The lights flickered, casting long, eerie shadows on the walls. Panic surged through me. This wasn't right. This wasn't how Disneyland was supposed to be. Suddenly, the emergency lights kicked in, bathing the ride in a sickly greenish glow. And that's when I saw them, the characters. Mickey, Minnie, Goofy, Pluto, all of them, standing in the shadows, their costumes tattered, eyes gleaming with a manic, unnatural light. I tried to make sense of it, but before I could react, they lunged at us. It was like a nightmare come to life. Mickey's gloves clawing, Goofy's laughter twisted into a sinister cackle. We fought back, adrenaline coursing through us, but it was like they were possessed, driven by some dark force. We managed to escape the ride, breathless and shaken, but the nightmare didn't end there. As we fled through the park, we saw more characters, their once joyful costumes now twisted and grotesque. It was like a waking nightmare, the happiest place on earth, transformed into a macabre carnival of horrors. We found refuge in a gift shop, barricading ourselves in, trying to make sense of the madness. But the eerie silence that settled over the park was broken by the distant echo of footsteps, a haunting reminder that we were not alone. Hours passed, the darkness outside pressing in on us. We knew we had to make a move, to find a way out of this nightmare. With hearts pounding, we ventured back into the park, moving like shadows through the twisted, empty streets. As we reached the center of the park, we saw it, a lone figure standing before Sleeping Beauty Castle. It was Mickey, but not the Mickey we knew. His once jolly face was contorted into a grotesque mask of malevolence, and in his hand, he held a glinting object, a knife. The sight froze us in our tracks. We were trapped, cornered by a nightmarish version of the beloved character. Panic surged through me, threatening to drown out reason. But then, in a split-second decision, I picked up a discarded park map, crumpling it into a makeshift projectile. With a deep breath, I hurled it towards Mickey, distracting him just long enough for us to sprint towards the exit. The adrenaline fueled our escape, our feet pounding against the pavement. We burst through the gates, breathless and shaken, the twisted world of Disneyland fading behind us. The night air was cool against our sweat-drenched skin, a stark contrast to the horrors we'd left behind. As we stumbled into the safety of the outside world, the realization hit us. We had survived a nightmarish trip to the happiest place on earth. The memory of those deranged characters would haunt us forever, a reminder that even in the most magical places, darkness can lurk. So, the next time you visit Disneyland, keep an eye out. You never know what might be lurking behind the smiles and laughter. And remember, sometimes the happiest places can be the most terrifying. The Haunted Magic Kingdom. You ever had a Disney trip that turned into the stuff of nightmares? Picture this, a sunny day at the Magic Kingdom, the scent of cotton candy and popcorn filling the air, and the joyful shrieks of children on their favorite rides. It was supposed to be the ultimate vacation, a fairy tale come to life. But little did I know that this would be the Disney trip that would turn into a haunting tale. We started the day with boundless excitement. My friends and I were like kids in a candy store, rushing from one attraction to another. The lines were long, but the promise of Disney magic kept us going. As we approached Space Mountain, we couldn't contain our glee. The anticipation was electric, sending a shiver of excitement down our spines. We climbed into the rocket seats, ready for a thrilling journey through the cosmos. The ride kicked off with a burst of music and swirling lights, and we were plunged into darkness. But something was off. The music cut out, the lights flickered, and the rocket shuddered to a halt. Panic washed over us as we sat in the pitch-black tunnel, the only sound being our racing hearts. Suddenly, from above, a deafening crash echoed through the darkness. Entire ride shook, and screams erupted from the other riders. I could feel my cold sweat as the realization hit us. The ride was collapsing. We fumbled for our phones, trying to use their feeble flashlights to find an exit, but the confusion and darkness were overwhelming. As we stumbled blindly through the labyrinthine tunnels, I could feel the claustrophobia closing in. The chaos outside was unreal. The lights on Space Mountain were flickering, casting eerie shadows that danced on the ground. People were scrambling to get out, their faces a mix of fear and disbelief. It was like a scene from a disaster movie, but it was happening right before our eyes. The nightmare didn't stop there. The commotion spread to the rest of the park. The carousel of progress was anything but progressive as it ground to a halt, the animatronic figures eerily frozen mid-action. The haunted mansion truly lived up to its name as it groaned and creaked, the ghostly apparitions within its walls seemingly coming to life. Panic and confusion reigned supreme as chaos swept through the crowd. The other rides began to suffer similar fates, and screams filled the air. It was like the very essence of Disney magic had turned into a curse. My friends and I decided to find a safer place to regroup and get a better grasp of the situation. We stumbled into a deserted shop, its shelves filled with Disney merchandise, all bathed in the sickly glow of the flickering lights. There, in the eerie silence, we could hear the distant wailing of sirens and the distant rumble of helicopters. We knew we had to find a way out, but the park was in chaos. The streets were clogged with panicked visitors, some injured, others in tears. It was like a nightmare had engulfed the Magic Kingdom. But then, as if emerging from a dream, I spotted something in the distance. Cinderella's castle, standing tall and majestic. We decided to head in that direction, hoping it would lead us to safety. As we got closer to the castle, we realized something was amiss. The towering structure loomed overhead, but it was marred by deep cracks and crumbling spires. The once sparkling moat was now a murky pool of water, its surface mirroring the chaos around it. We hesitated, but the sound of sirens in the distance urged us forward. We crossed a shaky drawbridge and entered the castle, the inside eerily empty. It was as if the place had been abandoned for centuries. We climbed the spiral staircase to the top, each step echoing in the silence. And that's when we saw it, a figure in tattered clothing, their back turned to us. They were hunched over, as if searching for something. "Hey, are you okay?" I called out, my voice trembling. The figure turned, revealing a face twisted into a rictus grin, eyes vacant and haunting. It was a cast member, their costume tattered and stained. The look in their eyes sent a shiver down my spine. With a guttural growl, the cast member lunged at us, their hands outstretched. We fought back, stumbling down the staircase in a frantic retreat. The descent felt like an eternity, our hearts pounding and our breaths coming in gasps. We burst out of the castle, the injured and disoriented visitors still roaming the park. We knew we had to get out, to escape the nightmare that had engulfed the park. As we made our way to the park's entrance, I couldn't help but glance back at the once magical place. It was now a twisted, nightmarish version of its former self. The very heart of Disney had turned into a house of horrors. The Magic Kingdom had become a place of nightmares, and we barely escaped with our lives. The Disney trip we dreamed of had become a haunting tale, a reminder that even the most magical places can turn into a nightmare in the blink of an eye. The Shadowed Magic Land. You know, there's a certain magic that hangs in the air at Disneyland. The laughter, the music, the bright colors, it's a world of its own. But let me tell you about the Disney trip that turned into a waking nightmare. It started like any other, with the scent of popcorn and the sound of children's laughter echoing through the park. My family and I were giddy with excitement, weaving through the crowd like a river finding its course. The sun hung low in the sky, casting a warm golden glow on Sleeping Beauty Castle. We couldn't wait to explore every nook and cranny, ride every attraction, and soak in every bit of Disney magic. As evening fell, we joined the line for Pirates of the Caribbean. The air was thick with anticipation, and my heart raced with the promise of adventure. But as we boarded the boat, an uneasy feeling settled in the pit of my stomach. The ride was different, off somehow. The familiar pirate animatronics seemed more menacing, their laughter more sinister. Just as the boat rounded a bend, the lights flickered and went out completely. Panic gripped the riders, but before we could react, a gunshot rang out, followed by screams of terror. My heart pounded in my chest, and I grabbed my family's hands, trying to stay calm amidst the chaos. In the darkness, I could barely make out the shapes of panicked visitors, their cries filling the air. My mind raced, trying to make sense of the situation. This couldn't be happening at Disneyland, of all places, but there was no denying the reality before us. We huddled together, trying to stay low and out of sight. The sound of rapid footsteps and more gunshots echoed through the cavernous ride, each one sending a shockwave of fear through us. We were trapped, helpless in the face of this inexplicable violence. Suddenly, a voice cut through the darkness, cold and detached. "This is my kingdom now," it sneered, sending chills down my spine. It was the voice of a madman, a stark contrast to the whimsical world of Disney. We knew we had to find a way out, to escape the nightmare that had engulfed the park. With trembling hands, we made our way through the darkened tunnels, guided only by the distant echoes of chaos. Every shadow seemed to hold a threat, every sound a potential danger. As we emerged from the ride, we were met with a scene of utter pandemonium. Visitors were running in every direction, their faces contorted with fear. The once magical world of Disneyland had transformed into a scene of unimaginable horror. We moved with purpose, trying to find a safe haven amidst the chaos, but every turn seemed to lead us deeper into the nightmare. We tried to stay calm, to think rationally, but the weight of the situation was suffocating. Suddenly, a figure emerged from the shadows, a Disney cast member, their uniform disheveled, eyes wide with terror. "Follow me," they whispered urgently, their voice trembling. We didn't hesitate, trusting that they might lead us to safety. We wound through hidden passageways and backstage areas, far from the prying eyes of the chaos outside. The cast member explained that they had managed to escape the gunmen and were now trying to lead others to safety. As we navigated the labyrinthine passages, my mind raced with a mixture of fear and determination. This couldn't be the end of our Disney trip, of our family's adventure. We had to find a way out, to survive and ensure our loved ones were safe. Finally, we emerged into a secluded courtyard, bathed in the pale light of the moon. It was a moment of respite, a chance to catch our breath. The cast member assured us that help was on the way, that the authorities were working to contain the situation. As we waited, the reality of what had transpired sunk in. The park that had once been a source of joy and wonder had become a nightmarish battleground. It was a stark reminder that even in the most magical places, darkness could find its way in. In the days that followed, as news of the tragic events at Disneyland spread, the world mourned. The park, once a symbol of innocence and joy, had been forever marred by the senseless violence. As I reflect on that fateful day, I can't help but feel a mixture of gratitude and sorrow. Gratitude for the bravery of the cast member who led us to safety, and sorrow for the lives lost and the innocence shattered. Disneyland will forever hold a different meaning for me now, a place of resilience, of the strength of the human spirit in the face of unimaginable darkness. It serves as a reminder that even in the most magical places, we must remain vigilant, for the shadows can find their way in. Shadows of the Forgotten Pharaoh. You ever have a moment when you feel like you're standing at the precipice of something unimaginable? That's exactly how I felt as I stood before the ancient Egyptian pyramid, its imposing stones towering above me, casting long foreboding shadows across the desert sands. The wind whispered secrets of ages past, urging me to enter, to uncover the mysteries within. But little did I know, this journey would lead me down a path I could never have anticipated. As I stepped through the massive stone entrance, a chill swept through me. The air inside was thick with the weight of centuries, carrying the echoes of countless souls who had passed through these sacred halls. I moved forward, my footsteps echoing in the cavernous chamber, my breath mingling with the dust of ages. The walls were adorned with hieroglyphs, their meanings lost to time. They seemed to dance in the flickering torchlight, telling stories of gods and pharaohs, of life and death. I traced my fingers along the ancient carvings, a shiver running down my spine. It was like I could feel the pulse of history beneath my touch. Deeper into the pyramid I ventured, the passageways growing narrower, the air growing heavier. The darkness seemed to press in on me, a living, breathing entity. My heart pounded in my chest, a steady rhythm that echoed through the depths. As I descended further, I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. It was as if the very stones themselves held a silent vigil, bearing witness to my intrusion. I brushed it off as my imagination, but the sensation never truly left. Then I stumbled upon a chamber unlike any other. The walls were adorned with golden ornaments, their gleam dulled by the passage of time. At the center, a sarcophagus rested, its lid slightly ajar, revealing the weathered visage of a long-forgotten pharaoh. It was a sight to behold, a connection to a world that had long since faded into legend. As I approached, a sense of reverence washed over me. This was a moment of rare significance, a glimpse into a history that had shaped the course of human civilization. I couldn't help but feel a sense of awe and gratitude for the opportunity to stand in this sacred space. But then, as I reached out to touch the sarcophagus, a voice echoed in the chamber, low and guttural. It sent a shock through me, freezing me in place. I strained to hear, but the words were lost to the echoes of the chamber. I turned, my heart pounding, scanning the chamber for the source of the voice. It seemed to come from all directions, as if the very walls themselves spoke. I tried to steady my breathing, to rationalize the experience, but the feeling of being watched intensified. Suddenly, a low rumble echoed through the chamber, the ground beneath me shaking. I stumbled, trying to maintain my balance. The air grew thick with tension, a palpable energy that sent waves of unease through me. And then, as if in response to some ancient incantation, the sarcophagus began to tremble. I watched in disbelief as the lid slowly creaked open, revealing the empty space within. It was as if the pharaoh had risen from the dead, his presence looming over me. I backed away, my heart racing, my mind a whirlwind of fear and confusion. This was beyond anything I could have imagined, beyond any rational explanation. The ancient spirits of this pyramid seemed to have awakened, their presence engulfing me. As I turned to flee, a figure stood in the doorway, their form shrouded in darkness. I could barely make out their features, but their eyes gleamed with an unnatural light. It was as if they were a guardian, a sentinel of this ancient realm. They spoke, their voice a low, resonant hum that reverberated through the chamber. "You have awakened forces beyond your understanding," they intoned. "You must leave this place, or face the consequences." I nodded, unable to find my voice, and stumbled past the figure, my legs carrying me as if on autopilot. The passageway seemed to stretch on endlessly, a maze of shadows and whispers. I emerged into the harsh sunlight, the desert air a welcome embrace. As I looked back at the pyramid, I couldn't help but feel a sense of gratitude for my escape. The ancient spirits had shown me a glimpse of their world, a world of power and mystery that I could never fully comprehend. And so, I left the pyramid behind, carrying with me the weight of an experience that would stay with me forever. The shadows of the forgotten pharaohs will forever haunt my dreams, a reminder of the thin veil that separates our world from the ancient realms that lie beneath. Whispers of the forgotten ancients. You ever wonder what secrets ancient pyramids hold? It was a question that had been gnawing at the back of my mind for years, a curiosity that I couldn't shake. So, when the opportunity to explore an Inca pyramid presented itself, I couldn't resist. What I encountered within those ancient stone walls was far more chilling than I could have ever imagined. The pyramid stood in the heart of the dense Amazon rainforest, a forgotten relic of a civilization lost to time. As I approached, I couldn't help but marvel at the sheer size and intricacy of the structure. The stone steps led me deeper into the pyramid's depths as I descended further into the earth. The air inside was heavy and humid, as if the very walls exhaled the weight of centuries. Torchlight flickered and cast eerie, dancing shadows along the passageways. It was like stepping back in time, into a world where gods and kings reigned. I was alone, my footsteps echoing in the dimly lit chambers, and the silence was all-encompassing. It was broken only by the sound of my own breath and the distant hum of the rainforest beyond. I couldn't help but feel a sense of unease, as if I were being watched by the ancient spirits of this sacred place. The walls of the pyramid were adorned with intricate carvings, telling stories of rituals, battles, and sacrifices. The detailed craftsmanship was nothing short of astonishing, a testament to the skill and dedication of the Inca people. I traced my fingers along the cool stone, lost in the beauty and mystery of the artistry. Deeper into the pyramid I ventured, and the passageways grew narrower and more labyrinthine. My surroundings became increasingly suffocating, and I could hear the echoes of my own breathing and footsteps. It was disorienting, as if the pyramid itself were a living, breathing entity. As I turned a corner, I came face to face with an entrance to a chamber. The torchlight barely reached the interior, shrouding it in shadows. My curiosity got the best of me. and I stepped inside. The chamber was unlike any I had seen before. It was a place of worship, I realized, with a stone altar at its center. Golden relics lay scattered on its surface, their gleam dulled by the passage of time. The air was thick with the scent of incense, and the walls bore the marks of ancient offerings. But as I gazed around in awe, a sudden realization struck me. The chamber was not as empty as it seemed. A soft whisper seemed to drift through the air, indistinct but haunting. I couldn't tell if it was the wind or something more otherworldly. I strained to hear, to make sense of the ethereal voice that seemed to beckon me closer. It was a language I didn't understand, ancient and filled with a strange, mesmerizing cadence. The very air seemed to vibrate with its presence. I hesitated, my rational mind warring with my curiosity, but the pull was too strong to resist. As I inched closer to the stone altar, the whispers grew more pronounced. The voice seemed to emanate from the golden relics, their gleam intensifying. I reached out to touch one of the relics, a small figurine of a deity, and that's when it happened. The world around me seemed to blur and distort. I felt a sudden disorientation, as if the very fabric of reality were unraveling. The chamber transformed before my eyes, the stone walls giving way to lush vegetation and the distant sound of running water. I stood in an ancient Inca village, the people going about their daily lives. It was like I had stepped into a living dream, a portal to a time long past. But there was something off about this vision. The people in the village moved in a slow, deliberate manner, their eyes vacant and distant. It was as if they were trapped in a never-ending loop, reliving the same moments over and over. As I watched, a shiver ran down my spine. I realized that I was not a spectator, but a part of this vision, a silent observer in a world that had long since disappeared. I tried to move, to interact with the people, but I was like a ghost, invisible and intangible. And then I saw it, the source of the whispers. At the center of the village, a figure stood, their form obscured by a tattered cloak. They chanted in that ancient, mesmerizing language, their voice a haunting refrain that seemed to hold the village in its thrall. I watched as the figure raised their arms, their voice growing more intense. The villagers began to move with purpose, their eyes filled with a manic fervor. It was like a spell, a dark ritual that bound them to the will of the cloaked figure. As the vision continued, I realized a grim truth. The figure was conducting a sacrifice, a ritual to appease the gods and secure the village's future. The villagers, in their blind devotion, willingly offered themselves to the gods, their bodies becoming vessels for ancient spirits. Echoes of the lost temple. Picture this, the dense, oppressive humidity of the Yucatan Peninsula, the air thick with the scent of earth and history. I found myself standing at the base of an ancient Mayan pyramid, its stone steps worn smooth by the passage of time. It was as if the very earth itself held its breath, anticipating the secrets that lay within. Little did I know that this journey would lead me down a path of unimaginable terror. As I ascended the steps, each one echoing with the weight of centuries, I couldn't help but marvel at the ingenuity of the Mayan architects. The pyramid loomed over me, its stone blocks fitting together with a precision that spoke of a masterful craftsmanship. It was a testament to the power and sophistication of this ancient civilization. The entrance to the pyramid beckoned, a dark portal into the heart of a forgotten world. I stepped inside, the air growing cooler, carrying with it a faint scent of decay. Torchlight flickered along the passageways, casting long dancing shadows that seemed to come alive with every step. I was alone, my breath, the only sound in the silence. The weight of the stones pressed in on me, a palpable presence that seemed to hold the very essence of the pyramid. It was like standing on the threshold of a realm where time had no meaning. The walls were adorned with intricate carvings, telling stories of gods and rituals, of life and death. I ran my fingers along the smooth stone, feeling the power that resonated within. The glyph seemed to come to life, the figures dancing and leaping with an otherworldly energy. Deeper into the pyramid I ventured, the passageways growing narrower, the air growing colder. It was like descending into the heart of the earth itself. The torchlight barely reached the edges, casting long shadows that seemed to whisper secrets to those who dared to listen. As I turned a corner, I came upon a chamber, its entrance guarded by two stone statues, their faces frozen in eternal vigilance. The chamber beyond was a sight to behold. It was a place of worship, I realized, with an altar at its center, adorned with offerings of jade and obsidian. The air was heavy with the scent of copal incense, its smoky tendrils reaching up towards the heavens. I could almost hear the faint echoes of ancient chants carried on the wind that filtered through the cracks in the stone. It was a sacred space, a place where the ancient Mayans communed with their gods. As I moved further into the chamber, a sense of unease settled over me. It was as if the very air held its breath, anticipating my intrusion. I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched, of unseen eyes following my every move. Then, in the dim torchlight, I saw it, a glimmer of gold at the far end of the chamber. It was a statue, an effigy of a Mayan deity, its eyes gleaming with precious gemstones. It was a sight of breathtaking beauty, a testament to the reverence with which the Mayans held their gods. But as I approached, a shiver ran down my spine. The statue seemed to radiate a strange energy, a power that pulsed in the air around it. It was as if the very essence of the deity had been captured in the stone, waiting to be awakened. I reached out to touch the statue, my fingers brushing against the cool surface. That's when it happened. The ground beneath me trembled, a low rumble echoing through the chamber. I stumbled back, my heart pounding, as the very stone seemed to shift and groan. And then, in a blinding flash of light, the chamber transformed before my eyes. I stood in the heart of an ancient city, the stone buildings rising around me in a majestic display of power and beauty. The air was filled with the sounds of life, the voices of the Mayan people echoing through the streets. I watched in awe as the city came to life, as the people went about their daily routines. It was like a window into a world long past, a living, breathing testament to the ingenuity and spirit of the Mayan civilization. I was a silent observer, a guest in a time that had long since faded into history. But then, as I looked closer, I saw something that sent a shiver down my spine. The people moved with a strange, deliberate purpose, their eyes vacant and distant. It was as if they were trapped in a never-ending loop, reliving the same moments over and over. I tried to call out, to interact with them, but my voice fell on deaf ears. I was like a ghost, invisible and intangible, a mere spectator in this eerie tableau. The realization hit me like a wave. The city was not as it seemed. It was a facade, a carefully crafted illusion that masked a far darker truth. As I looked around in growing horror, I saw the source of the illusion, a figure standing at the center of the city square, their form obscured by a tattered cloak. They chanted in a language I couldn't understand, their voice carrying a haunting, otherworldly cadence. I watched as the figure raised their arms, their voice growing more intense. The people in the city moved with a manic fervor, their eyes filled with a strange, unnatural light. It was like a spell, a dark ritual that bound them to the will of the cloaked figure. I tried to tear my gaze away, to escape the nightmare unfolding before me, but I was frozen, a captive audience to this chilling spectacle. The air grew thick with the scent of incense, and the sounds of chanting and drums filled my ears. And then, in a sudden blinding flash of light, the vision ended. I stood once again in the chamber, my heart pounding, my breath racked. The statue of the deity gleamed before me, its eyes seeming to hold a malevolent glint. I stumbled back, my mind reeling from the revelation. The ancient Mayan pyramid held secrets far darker than I could have ever imagined. The very stones seemed to pulse with a malevolent energy, as if they bore witness to the horrors that had transpired within. As I made my way back through the passageways, I couldn't shake the feeling of dread that clung to me. The pyramid, once a marvel of human achievement, had become a tomb of nightmares. The echoes of the lost city haunted my every step. And so, I emerged from the pyramid, blinking in the harsh sunlight, a sense of profound relief washing over me. The world outside seemed to pulse with life, a stark contrast to the darkness I had left behind. I walked away from the pyramid, my mind a whirlwind of emotions. The experience had left its mark, a haunting reminder that some truths are better left undiscovered. The ancient Mayan pyramid held its secrets, and I had glimpsed into the depths of its darkness. As I left the rainforest behind, carrying with me the weight of an experience that would stay with me forever, I couldn't help but feel a profound sense of gratitude. I had survived the horrors within, a testament to the strength of the human spirit in the face of unimaginable darkness. And so the ancient pyramid remained, its secrets buried deep within its stone walls, a silent witness to the terrors that had unfolded within its chambers. The echoes of the lost city would forever haunt my dreams, a chilling reminder of the thin veil that separates our world from the ancient realms that lie beneath. The three-sided abyss. Listen closely, because what I'm about to tell you is a tale that'll chill you to the bone. It's about a place that's captivated imaginations and struck fear into sailors' hearts for centuries, the Bermuda Triangle. You've heard the stories, I'm sure. Ships vanishing without a trace, planes disappearing into thin air. But let me assure you, there's something much darker lurking beneath the surface. Picture it, a moonless night, the sea stretching out before me like an inky abyss. I was aboard the SS Tempest, a vessel sturdy enough to brave any storm. The crew was seasoned, the captain unwavering, and we thought we were prepared for anything. The sea was eerily calm, not a breath of wind stirring the sails. It felt like a shroud had been cast over the ocean, a silence so thick you could almost taste it. We sailed further into the heart of the triangle, that infamous stretch between Bermuda, Miami, and Puerto Rico. As the night wore on, a strange unease settled over the crew. We couldn't put our fingers on it, but it was as if the very air around us held its breath, anticipating something we couldn't yet see. I glanced around, meeting the eyes of my shipmates, and saw the same unease mirrored in their expressions. Then it happened. A low guttural hum seemed to rise from the depths of the sea, reverberating through the hull of the ship. It was like the ocean itself was speaking to us, a voice of ancient power and untold mysteries. My heart raced, the sound sending shivers down my spine. I rushed to the deck, my eyes scanning the horizon for any sign of what could be causing this unearthly phenomenon. The water around us seemed to ripple with an unnatural energy, as if some unseen force were at work beneath the surface. That's when I saw it, a faint ethereal glow on the horizon. It pulsed with an otherworldly light, casting an eerie glow across the water. It was like a siren's call, drawing us closer with a hypnotic allure. The captain barked orders, his voice tinged with a mixture of fear and determination. We steered toward the light, unable to resist its pull. It grew brighter with each passing moment, illuminating the dark expanse of the sea around us. As we approached, I could make out a shape in the water, a shadowy form that seemed to dance just beneath the surface. It was like nothing I'd ever seen before, a creature of myth and nightmare. Its eyes gleamed with an unsettling intelligence, and its form seemed to shift and change with the movement of the waves. A sense of dread settled over me, a realization that we were in the presence of something far beyond our understanding. It was as if the veil between our world and another had been torn asunder, revealing a realm of darkness and chaos. The captain shouted orders to turn the ship, to flee from this monstrous apparition, but it was too late. With a sudden violent force, the creature surged from the water, its massive form towering over us. The deck shuddered beneath its weight, sending crew members sprawling. I could hardly believe my eyes. The creature was like a leviathan from the depths of hell, its body a mass of writhing tentacles and grotesque appendages. It let out a deafening roar, a sound that seemed to reverberate through the very fabric of reality. Panic erupted among the crew, shouts and screams filling the air. We were like ants before a titan, helpless and insignificant in the face of such overwhelming power. I could feel the cold sweat on my brow, the taste of salt and fear on my lips. As the creature loomed over us, I felt a strange connection, an understanding that went beyond words. It was as if the entity could see into the depths of my soul, could sense the fear and awe that coursed through me. I could almost hear its voice in my mind, a dark, ancient presence that spoke of eons of existence. And then, in a blinding flash of light, everything changed. I stood on solid ground, the deck of the ship replaced by cold stone tiles. I was no longer aboard the Tempest, but in a chamber of unimaginable grandeur. The walls were adorned with carvings and glyphs, telling a story of a civilization far older and more powerful than any I had ever known. The air was heavy with the scent of incense, and the sound of distant chanting echoed through the chamber. In the center of the room stood the entity, its form now more ethereal than monstrous. It seemed to radiate a strange, mesmerizing energy, drawing me closer with an irresistible force. It spoke, not in words, but in images and emotions, a language that transcended the barriers of speech. I realized then that this creature was not a threat, but a guardian, a sentinel of the ancient realm that lay beyond the veil. It had shown itself to us, not out of malice, but to remind us of the boundless mysteries that lie hidden in the depths of the sea. With a final enigmatic gaze, the entity faded away, leaving me standing alone in the chamber. I was filled with a profound sense of awe and gratitude, a realization that I had witnessed something truly extraordinary. As I made my way back to the surface, the memory of the encounter stayed with me, a reminder that there are forces in this world that defy explanation. The Bermuda Triangle held secrets beyond our wildest imaginings, and I have been granted a glimpse into their depths. And so, I emerged from that fateful encounter forever changed, carrying with me a sense of wonder and reverence for the mysteries that lie hidden in the world around us. The veil of the abyss had been lifted, if only for a moment, revealing a realm of ancient power and untold beauty. And I, a mere witness to its majesty, would carry that memory with me for the rest of my days. Disaster at sea. Let me take you on a journey into the heart of the Bermuda Triangle. It's a place that's captivated imaginations and struck fear into the hearts of sailors and aviators for ages. A region known for its mysterious disappearances. It's the kind of place where even the most seasoned traveler should tread lightly. Picture this, a calm, sunny day at sea, with a salt breeze in my hair and the sparkling waters stretching as far as the eye can see. I was aboard the SS Serenity, a sturdy ship with a crew of old salts who had seen it all. We were making our way through the Triangle, that infamous stretch between Bermuda, Miami, and Puerto Rico. At first, everything seemed perfectly normal. The sea was as still as a pond, and I marveled at the beauty of the endless horizon. My fellow passengers were relaxed, some even sunbathing on the deck. It was all sunshine and smooth sailing, and I thought we were in for a serene, uneventful journey. But as I took in the view, something shifted in the atmosphere. The clear blue sky darkened, and ominous clouds gathered on the horizon. I couldn't shake the feeling of unease that washed over me. It was as if the very elements were conspiring to turn our idyllic journey into a nightmare. And then, without warning, the tranquility shattered. A sudden thunderstorm roared to life, unleashing a torrent of rain and fierce winds that whipped through the sails. The ship pitched and rolled with the violence of the tempest, and I clung to the railings as if my life depended on it. The once calm sea turned into a churning cauldron, the waves rising to monstrous heights. I had never seen anything like it. The ship was tossed about like a child's toy, and the crew scrambled to secure everything that wasn't bolted down. Panic gripped the passengers. Some huddled below deck, others clung to the rails, their faces etched with terror. It was a chaos of screams and shouts, and the sound of the wind and rain was deafening. As the ship fought to stay afloat, I couldn't help but wonder if this was the end. My mind raced with thoughts of those who had gone before us, lost in this very sea, swallowed up by its mysteries. The Bermuda Triangle was living up to its sinister reputation, and I feared we would join the ranks of the vanished. Hours passed, though it felt like an eternity. The storm showed no signs of abating, and the ship groaned and creaked under the strain. The crew worked tirelessly to keep us afloat, and I couldn't help but admire their determination in the face of such adversity. As the storm raged on, I caught sight of something on the horizon. It was a ship, or at least what was left of one. The vessel lay broken and battered, its masts snapped like twigs, its hull a splintered wreck. It was a chilling reminder of the fate that could befall us. But then, just as suddenly as it had begun, the storm started to dissipate. The winds died down, the rain eased, and the sea slowly calmed. It was as if the Bermuda Triangle had tired of its violent display and decided to release us from its clutches. With the worst behind us, the passengers and crew took a collective sigh of relief. We had weathered the storm, and the sun broke through the clouds, casting a warm golden light over the sea. It was a moment of respite, a chance to catch our breath and regain our composure. As the ship sailed on, I couldn't help but think of the mysteries that still lurked in the depths of the triangle. The storm had been terrifying, but it was a known danger, a force of nature that could be understood and predicted. But what about the unexplained disappearances, the strange phenomena, and the eerie stories that had haunted this region for centuries? And then, just as we thought our ordeal was over, something inexplicable happened. The ship seemed to shudder, as if it had hit an invisible wall. The crew rushed to the deck, their faces etched with confusion and concern. I joined them, my heart pounding in my chest. The water around us had turned an inky black, and a strange low hum filled the air. It was a sound like nothing I had ever heard, a resonance that seemed to vibrate through my very bones. The ship's instruments went haywire, the compass spinning wildly, and the lights flickering as if possessed. I looked out at the sea, and what I saw made my blood run cold. The water seemed to churn and boil, as if a powerful force lay just beneath the surface. It was as if the very fabric of reality had shifted, and we were on the precipice of an unknown abyss. With a sudden violent force, the ship was lifted out of the water and into the air. I watched in horror as the sea disappeared beneath us, replaced by an empty void. It was a sensation of weightlessness, a feeling of being untethered from the world as I knew it. The ship hung in the air, suspended between the sea and the sky, as if we had crossed into another dimension. It was a realm of darkness and chaos, a place where the laws of nature no longer held sway. I couldn't make sense of what I was seeing, and my mind reeled with a sense of unreality. And then, as suddenly as it had begun, the ship was dropped back into the sea. We hit the water with a bone-jarring impact, and I was thrown to the deck. The ship bobbed in the water, the crew and passengers dazed and disoriented. I looked around, my mind racing to process what had just happened. The Bermuda Triangle had revealed a new layer of its mysteries, a dimension beyond our understanding. I couldn't help but wonder if we had glimpsed something that was never meant to be seen. As the ship continued on its course, I knew that we had survived an encounter with the unknown, a brush with the enigmatic forces that lie hidden in the heart of the triangle. The Bermuda Triangle had shown us its true face, and I couldn't help but wonder if there were more secrets waiting to be uncovered. And so, as I gazed out at the sea, I carried with me the memory of that fateful day, a reminder that there are forces in this world that defy explanation. The Bermuda Triangle held mysteries beyond our wildest imaginings, and I had witnessed a glimpse of their power. It was a place of wonder and terror, a realm of the unknown, and I knew that its secrets would continue to haunt my thoughts for the rest of my days. Echoes of the Triangle. All right, let me share a tale that'll make your skin crawl. We're venturing into the heart of the Bermuda Triangle, a place where reality seems to twist and bend. You've heard the rumors, the tales of vanished ships and planes. Buckle up, because this story is a wild ride. It started as a simple pleasure cruise, a sunny day out on the open sea. I was aboard the Sea Voyager, a yacht fit for royalty, with a crew as professional as they come. The waters were calm, the sky a perfect shade of blue. It all seemed like smooth sailing through paradise. But here's where things took a turn. Out of nowhere, the world shifted. The sky darkened, the air grew thick with tension. It was like the very atmosphere was holding its breath, waiting for something to happen. The calm before the storm, they call it, but this was something else entirely. Suddenly, the tranquility shattered. Thunder cracked overhead, a violent chorus of nature's fury. Rain hammered down like nails, and the wind howled like a vengeful spirit. The Sea Voyager, once gliding so gracefully, now rocked and groaned under the onslaught. I'll admit, panic set in. The passengers went from lounging on the deck to gripping the railings for dear life. The crew moved with frantic urgency, securing anything that dared to be unmoored. It was chaos, a scene straight out of a nightmare. As the storm raged on, I couldn't help but think of all those stories I'd heard. Ships and planes vanishing into thin air, as if the triangle had an appetite for the lost. It was one thing to hear the tales, quite another to live them. The Bermuda Triangle had us in its grip, and I feared we were about to become another chapter in its dark history. Hours passed, though it felt like days. The storm showed no sign of relenting, and the Sea Voyager bore the scars of the battle. The crew, though weary, fought on. They were a testament to human resilience in the face of the unknown. Then, just as suddenly as it had begun, the storm abated. The wind died down, the rain eased, and the sea calmed. It was as if the Bermuda Triangle had grown tired of its tantrum and decided to let us go. We sailed on, the crew and passengers breathing sighs of relief. The sun broke through the clouds, casting a golden glow over the water. It was a moment of respite, a chance to regroup and gather our wits. But here's where it gets strange. Just when we thought we were in the clear, the sea seemed to shimmer and shift. It was like a ripple in reality itself. I watched in disbelief as the horizon warped and twisted, as if we were being pulled into another dimension. The water turned an inky black, and a low hum filled the air. It was a sound that seemed to vibrate through my bones, a resonance that echoed in the very core of my being. The instruments on the ship went haywire, the compass spinning wildly, and the lights flickering like strobe lights at a rave. I stood there, frozen in awe and terror, as the sea seemed to part before us. The ship was lifted, as if by invisible hands, and we sailed through a gateway into a new world. It was a realm of shadows and echoes, a place where the laws of nature held no sway. The ship floated in the void, suspended in a sea of darkness. It was a sensation of weightlessness, of being untethered from reality. I couldn't make sense of what I was seeing, and my mind reeled with the sheer impossibility of it all. And then, just as suddenly as it had begun, we were dropped back into the sea. The impact was bone-jarring, and I was thrown to the deck. The ship bobbed on the water, the crew and passengers dazed and disoriented. I looked around, my mind struggling to process what had just happened. We had crossed into another dimension, a place beyond our understanding. The Bermuda Triangle had shown us a glimpse of its true nature, and I couldn't help but wonder how many others had experienced the same. As the ship sailed on, I knew that we had witnessed something beyond explanation. The Bermuda Triangle held secrets that defied logic, that challenged the very fabric of reality. I couldn't shake the feeling that we had brushed against a force far greater than ourselves. And so, as I stood on the deck, gazing out at the sea, I carried with me the memory of that fateful day. The Bermuda Triangle had revealed a side of itself that few had ever seen, a dimension of shadows and echoes. It was a place of wonder and terror, a realm of the unknown, and I knew that its mysteries would continue to haunt my thoughts for the rest of my days. Echoes of Chernobyl. You ever wonder about the stories that hide in the darkest corners of history, those tales that chill you to your core? Well, I've got one for you that'll make your blood run cold. It starts with a place that still haunts our nightmares, Chernobyl. Picture it, the eerie calm of Pripyat, a city nestled next to the Chernobyl nuclear power plant. I was there as a young engineer, ready to embark on what I thought was just another day on the job. The sky was clear, and the plant seemed to hum with life, as if it were a beast waiting to be awakened. The reactor was a colossal thing, a technological marvel encased in concrete. It pulsed with energy, and the air was thick with the smell of ozone. But I'd worked at Chernobyl long enough to know that beneath its facade of power lay the potential for disaster. My fellow workers and I had a camaraderie, a sense that we were all in this together. We understood the risks, and we believed in the importance of our work, or so we thought. The reactor was due for a safety test, one that had been postponed time and time again. As the hours passed, tension grew like a storm on the horizon. I could feel the weight of responsibility settling on my shoulders. It was a day that would change my life forever. As the test began, I watched the control room with bated breath. The reactor's power output was supposed to decrease, but instead it began to rise. Panic spread among the workers, and I could see the fear in their eyes. We were hurtling toward a disaster. In a desperate bid to control the situation, I made the split-second decision to shut down the reactor. It was a move that would save lives, or so I believed. But I had no way of knowing that I was about to trigger a catastrophe of unimaginable proportions. The reactor fought back like a wounded beast, lashing out in its death throes. There was a deafening explosion, and the world around us was consumed in a blinding white light. It was like a nightmare, a living hell. I remember the heat, the searing pain that seeped through every fiber of my being. I watched as my fellow workers were thrown to the ground, their bodies contorted by the blast. It was a scene of unspeakable horror, and I felt a sense of guilt and horror that would stay with me for the rest of my days. As the dust settled, I found myself in a daze, a survivor in a city that had become a ghost town. Pripyat was a place of desolation, its streets empty, its buildings abandoned. The air was thick with the stench of death, and the ground was contaminated with a poison that would last for centuries. I joined the team of liquidators, the brave souls who ventured into the heart of the disaster to clean up the mess. It was a nightmare, a descent into a hellish landscape of radiation and decay. The Geiger counters screamed like banshees, and the air was heavy with the taste of metal. But as the days turned into weeks, I began to notice something strange. I could hear voices, whispers in the silence. At first, I thought it was just the product of my overactive imagination, a symptom of the trauma I had experienced. But the voices grew louder, more insistent. They seemed to call to me, to guide me through the ruins of Pripyat. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being led by an unseen hand, that I was not alone in this desolate place. One night, as I wandered through the ruins, I came across a figure in the darkness. It was a man, or at least it appeared to be. He was dressed in the uniform of a Chernobyl worker, his face hidden in the shadows. He spoke to me in a voice that sent shivers down my spine. He told me that he was a survivor, like me, and that he had been waiting for someone to help him. He claimed to know the secrets of Chernobyl, the truth that had been hidden from the world. As he spoke, I couldn't help but feel a sense of unease. It was as if he knew things that no one else could possibly know, that he held the key to the mysteries that had haunted me for so long. He led me through the ruins, deeper into the heart of the disaster. And there, in the shadows, I saw something that would change my life forever. It was a room, a chamber of darkness and decay, filled with the echoes of the past. In the center of the room stood a figure, a man dressed in a lab coat, his face twisted in a rictus of agony. It was as if he were frozen in time, a prisoner of the disaster that had consumed him. The man in the shadows told me that this was the truth of Chernobyl, the dark secret that had been buried beneath layers of lies and deception. He claimed that the reactor had not exploded by accident, but that it had been sabotaged, that there were forces at work that went beyond human understanding. And then, in a flash of blinding light, the figure in the lab coat vanished, leaving me standing in the darkness, alone and bewildered. I couldn't make sense of what I had just witnessed. It was as if I had glimpsed a world beyond our own, a realm of darkness and chaos that lay hidden in the heart of Chernobyl. The man in the shadows had shown me a truth that defied explanation, a mystery that would continue to haunt my thoughts for the rest of my days. As I left Pripyat, I knew that I carried with me the memory of that fateful day, a reminder that there are forces in this world that go beyond our understanding. The Chernobyl disaster held secrets that defied logic, that challenged the very fabric of reality. It was a place of wonder and terror, a realm of the unknown, and I couldn't help but wonder if the truth of Chernobyl would ever be revealed. Shadows of Fukushima. All right, gather round, and I'll spin you a tale that'll give you chills. This story begins in the heart of Fukushima, Japan, amidst the hum of a nuclear power plant. The air was thick with the scent of industry, and the sound of machinery reverberated in my bones. I was just an average worker, doing my rounds like any other day. The reactor, that behemoth of metal and concrete, stood before me, its presence both awe-inspiring and daunting. You could feel the weight of potential disaster in the air, always there, lurking. Now let me tell you, no one expects disaster on their shift. We go through our routines, checking and rechecking, believing that we've got it all under control. It's human nature, isn't it? We think we're invincible until reality proves us wrong. That fateful day, it started like any other. The control room buzzed with activity, buttons blinking, screens displaying endless streams of data. We were about to conduct a routine maintenance check, but the universe had other plans. The reactor's readings began to fluctuate, a tremor in the machinery. Panic swept through the control room like wildfire. The temperature was rising, and the alarms blared in our ears. We were on the brink of catastrophe. In a split-second decision, I made a call that would change everything. I initiated the emergency shutdown, a move that was meant to save lives. Little did I know, I had just set off a chain of events that would lead us to the edge of hell. The reactor fought back, as if it resented being silenced. There was a deafening explosion, a blinding flash of light that seared through my vision. The world seemed to blur into chaos, and I was tossed like a rag doll in the storm. I found myself on the ground, disoriented and struggling to breathe. The control room was a scene of unimaginable horror, a nightmare come to life. My fellow workers lay strewn about, their bodies contorted in agony. It was a sight that would haunt my dreams for years to come. As the dust settled, I forced myself to my feet, a survivor in a world that had been torn apart. The air was heavy with the acrid scent of burning metal, and the ground beneath my feet trembled with aftershocks. Outside, Fukushima was a city on the brink of chaos. The air was thick with panic, the streets filled with people fleeing for their lives. It was a scene of desperation and despair, a city in the throes of a disaster that would echo through history. I joined the ranks of the brave souls known as the liquidators, the men and women who ventured into the heart of the disaster to clean up the mess. It was a mission of unparalleled danger, a descent into a realm of radiation and decay. As I moved through the ruins, I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. It was as if the shadows themselves held secrets, as if the very air whispered tales of the horrors that had transpired. And then it happened. In a moment of distraction, I stumbled, and before I knew it, I was falling. My body plunged into darkness, and I landed with a bone-jarring impact. I was in a chamber of nightmares, a pit filled with nuclear waste. The air was heavy with the stench of decay, and the walls seemed to close in around me. Panic surged through my veins as I realized the gravity of my situation. I struggled to my feet, my body aching from the fall. Every breath felt like fire in my lungs, every step a test of my resolve. I knew that I had to get out, that my life depended on it. As I stumbled through the darkness, I could feel the effects of the radiation seeping into my bones. It was a sensation of dread, a knowledge that I was facing a fate worse than death. I pushed on, driven by sheer determination and the will to survive. Hours passed, though it felt like an eternity. The chamber seemed to stretch on forever, an endless maze of darkness and despair. I could hear the echoes of my own footsteps, a haunting reminder of my isolation. And then, just as I was about to give in to despair, I saw it, a faint glimmer of light, a sliver of hope in the darkness. I stumbled toward it, my heart pounding in my chest. As I emerged from the chamber, I was met with a sight that would stay with me for the rest of my days. The world outside had changed, transformed into a realm of shadows and echoes. It was as if I had entered a new dimension, a place beyond human understanding. I stumbled through the ruins of Fukushima, my body weakened by the radiation. The voices in my head grew louder, more insistent. They seemed to guide me, to lead me through the desolation. And then, in the distance, I saw him, the man in the shadows, the one who had led me through the darkness. He stood before me, his face hidden in the shadows. He spoke to me, his voice a whisper in the silence. He told me that he was a survivor, like me, and that he had been waiting for someone to help him. He claimed to know the secrets of Fukushima, the truth that had been hidden from the world. As he spoke, I couldn't help but feel a sense of unease. It was as if he knew things that no one else could possibly know, that he held the key to the mysteries that had haunted me for so long. He led me deeper into the heart of the disaster, to a place where the walls seemed to pulse with an unnatural energy. And there, in the shadows, I saw it. A chamber filled with figures, like specters frozen in time. They were the victims of the disaster, their faces contorted in agony. It was a scene of unspeakable horror, a reminder of the true cost of Fukushima. The man in the shadows told me that this was the truth of Fukushima, the dark secret that had been buried beneath layers of lies and deception. He claimed that the disaster had not been a mere accident, but a deliberate act of sabotage, that there were forces at work that went beyond human understanding. And then, in a flash of blinding light, the figures vanished, leaving me standing in the darkness, alone and bewildered. I couldn't make sense of what I had just witnessed. It was as if I had glimpsed a world beyond our own, a realm of darkness and chaos that lay hidden in the heart of Fukushima. The man in the shadows had shown me a truth that defied explanation, a mystery that would continue to haunt my thoughts for the rest of my days. As I left Fukushima, I knew that I carried with me the memory of that fateful day, a reminder that there are forces in this world that go beyond our understanding. The Fukushima disaster held secrets that defied logic, that challenged the very fabric of reality. It was a place of wonder and terror, a realm of the unknown, and I couldn't help but wonder if the truth of Fukushima would ever be revealed. The slow burn. All right, sit tight, because I've got a story that'll make your skin crawl. We're diving into the gritty world of nuclear power, where I spent my days in the belly of the beast, handling toxic waste like it was just another job. You see, it's not like the movies, all flashy buttons and dramatic countdowns. It's a grind, day in and day out. The plant hummed with a steady rhythm, the air thick with the scent of metal and the distant echo of machinery. My routine was simple: suit up, handle the waste, rinse and repeat. At first, it felt like any other job, just a paycheck at the end of the day. But as the days turned into weeks, I began to notice subtle changes. My skin seemed to pale, and my energy levels plummeted. I chalked it up to long hours and stress, but deep down, I knew something wasn't right. You see, the thing about handling toxic waste is you don't always see the damage it's doing. It's insidious, creeping into your system like a silent intruder. You feel fine one day, and the next, it's like your body's turned against you. I remember the first time I looked in the mirror and didn't recognize the person staring back at me. My skin was pallid, almost translucent, and dark circles etched deep under my eyes. I was wasting away, and there was no denying it. Still, I soldiered on, pushing through the fatigue and the ache that seemed to settle in my bones. It was like a slow burn, a relentless gnawing at the edges of my existence. Every day, I suited up and faced the waste, knowing that it was slowly devouring me from the inside. As the months passed, I watched my body deteriorate, like a car running on fumes. The doctors couldn't explain it, couldn't pinpoint the cause of my decline, but I knew. It was the waste, the poison that I handled every day, without a second thought. I began to hear whispers in the shadows, voices that seemed to dance at the edge of my consciousness. They were like echoes, distant and indistinct, but growing louder with each passing day. It was as if the very walls of the plant held secrets, secrets that were seeping into my mind. One night, as I stood before the barrels of waste, I felt a surge of anger, a sudden rebellion against the chains that bound me to this place. I wanted out, wanted to break free from the cycle of decay that was consuming me. With a sudden burst of energy, I pushed the barrel away, sending it crashing to the ground. The room seemed to spin, and the voices grew louder, swirling around me like a tornado of sound. It was as if the very air was alive, pulsing with a malevolent energy. And then, in a flash of blinding light, I was transported. It was like I had stepped into a nightmare, a realm of darkness and decay. The air was heavy with the stench of rot, and the ground beneath my feet seemed to shift and writhe. I stumbled through the darkness, my body weak and unsteady. Every step was a struggle, every breath a labored gasp. I knew that I was nearing the end, that my body was finally succumbing to the toxic embrace of the waste. And then, in the distance, I saw it, a door standing alone in the darkness like a beacon of hope. I stumbled toward it, my heart pounding in my chest. As I stepped through the door, I was met with a sight that would stay with me for the rest of my days. It was a chamber filled with figures that seemed to flicker in and out of existence. They were like specters, frozen in time, their faces contorted in agony. I knew then that I had stumbled upon the truth, the dark heart of the plant. These were the souls of those who had come before me, the ones who had paid the price for their proximity to the waste. And then, in a final, blinding flash of light, I was transported back to the plant, back to the reality of my impending demise. The voices were louder now, more insistent. They seemed to be urging me on, guiding me toward my final destination. As I stood before the barrels of waste, I knew that this was the end. My body was a shell, a husk of what it once was, but in that moment, I felt a strange sense of peace. I pushed the barrel away one final time, and as it crashed to the ground, the room seemed to explode in a symphony of light and sound. It was as if the very walls of the plant were rebelling, shaking off the weight of years of darkness. And then, in an instant, it was over. The plant was silent, the darkness receded, and I was left standing alone in the wreckage. As I took my final breath, I knew that I had found my freedom. The waste had taken its toll, but in the end, I had broken free from its grasp. And as the darkness closed in around me, I welcomed it, knowing that I was finally at peace.